Reactions. With reactions, there should be a button that says raise hand.
Gotcha. Okay.
Found it. Awesome.
Okay, we are live, Senator Kelly.
Good afternoon, everybody. The Senate Finance Committee is now in session. I will start by listing the order of the bills for today's hearing. First is Senate Bill 12, Senate Bill 165, Senate Bill 65, Senate Bill 153, Senate Bill 316, Senate Bill 135, Senate Bill 103, Senate Bill 192, and finally, Senate Bill 307. I'll remind everybody that the sponsor has unlimited time. The lead witness, proponent, has 5 minutes, and all others have 2.5 minutes. We will get started now with Senator Hettleman, Senate Bill 12.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair. My name is Shelley Hettleman. I'm Senator from District 11, and I am pleased to be here today to present Senate Bill 12. Senate Bill 12 creates an Office of Inspector General for Health. And before I go into the guts of the bill, I want to let you know that this bill is in the exact same format that the bill that your committee considered last year and passed out 11-0. Unfortunately, I think this bill would have been on a better trajectory had we had our additional 19 days to finish session. It also passed the House. The cross-file also passed the House and was pending before the committee. This bill is about transparency and it's about good government. And it is patterned after the creation of an inspector general in the State Department of Education. It's actually set up the exact same way. It would be this person would be jointly appointed by the governor, by the attorney general and state treasurer, subject to the advice and consent of this body. And it's very consistent, as I said, with the OIG in the Department of Education. Our spending on health, and I don't need to tell this committee, this is about 1/3 of our entire state budget. It is billions of dollars involving countless payments to different vendors, hospitals, et cetera. And while we do have a regular system, and when I was on the House side, I was the co-chair of the Joint Audit Committee, Joint Audit and Evaluation Committee, as we changed the name. As we all know, they are under-resourced and do not have the opportunity to get into the day-to-day spending where they're able to shine a light on the inner workings of this department. We believe that this office needs to be elevated and become more independent and should have the opportunity to report to the legislature as well as the executive branch. That's the bill. I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee has, and we have one more person to testify. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Colleagues, if you have any questions, you may use the raise hand function if you'd like.
Senator Kramer has a question.
Okay, Senator Kramer. Did you get yourself unmasked, Senator? I mean, well, not unmasked.
Unmuted. I believe I'm unmuted now. Thank you. That's
Okay.
the committee controls that power. I believe it's Ms. Kraft has that authority. Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator, thank you. I'm all in at the notion of transparency and good government. And I guess the question I have is that my understanding is that having the IG within the agency at the moment provides the secretary with information in real time and back and forth, or the secretary can get information in real time when there's concerns about direction or, whether things are being managed properly. have you given consideration, or is there a mechanism by which the Inspector General, if the concern is autonomy and independence, has there been any look at how that might be accomplished and still provide this coordinated effort between the department and the Inspector General embedded therein? And I quite frankly don't know how it's done. I don't know how contracts are done, but you know, we've dealt with this certainly in Montgomery County and certain agencies, and there have been mechanisms by which you know, how the contract is prepared or who it is that makes the done to ensure autonomy, and that there isn't this threat of, you know what, if you're not towing the line as the Inspector General, your contract doesn't get renewed, kind of thing. So could you give me a little clarification on that, because I'm not intimately familiar with how the office is functioning now?
Sure. And I appreciate those concerns. We are not moving the office actually physically out of the department. So the kind of back and forth that you're discussing could still happen. What we are doing though is changing the structure so that it is somebody who, for whom the appointment and removal process, which has to be done for cause, we would have a part in that. So there is some independence as well as being a part and parcel of the department. So right now, I would say it's a little too close. And this is patterned after other IGs where you do have some more distance between the department and the entity that's supposed to provide that measure of accountability. So a couple of those other elements are, there is that appointment and removal process for cause, that it's a fixed term, which is 5 years, that there are reporting requirements, and that there is independence for operations and policies and procedures, and that there is funding that would be part of the general fund, and that's provided for in this bill. So there is that regular back and forth, like you state, but there is also that that independence, which we all, I think, want in an IG. So I hope that answers your question.
No, thank you. I do appreciate some of that clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Earlier, I saw Senator Hayes with a raised hand. Do you still have a question? All right, Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Chair Kelly and Senator Heddleman. I was looking in some of the testimony, and I just wanted to give you the opportunity to respond to the Department of Health saying that this would eliminate the ability of the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit to prevent fraud within the Medicaid program. Can you share with me sort of like where your thoughts are on that? Because that's pretty serious.
So I have to say, my House colleague has had pretty immersive conversations, and the House committee has had a lot of hearings on these very issues. And that issue never came up last year, and it never came up in the conversations with the current IG directly. So that's something that they are bringing to the table now that wasn't an issue before. So I can't speak to it other than to say, you know, that there was absolutely a case pre-pandemic for this office and for this accountability. And I would say in the pandemic and post-pandemic, it's even a higher concern and a higher need for it, given we know, and our constituents certainly know, all of the issues that the Department of Health are dealing with right now with regard to, you know, back when, with regard to PPE, with regard to testing, et cetera. And so there's that piece, and there's also the fraud and accountability. So I don't see that the Medicaid unit as a particular concern, honestly.
Okay, good question, great answer. It occurs to me that the department, if it had such a serious concern, should have had someone here physically to testify and to answer questions. And they've only submitted written testimony, which is, I guess, the basis of the question being put before us now. I see no other raised hands. Is that correct? Okay. All right, next, we have Bailey Chapman, Maryland Citizens Health Initiative.
Good morning, or sorry, good afternoon. Could everyone hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the Finance Committee, thank you for this opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 12, which would establish an Office of the Inspector General for Health as a weapon against waste, fraud, and abuse in the healthcare industry. Every dollar wasted in the provision of healthcare is a dollar that cannot be spent on healthcare for those who need it. In other segments of government, inspector generals have been very successful in discovering instances of waste, fraud, and abuse that have saved substantial sums of funds. Please give Senate Bill 12 a favorable report to help move our state forward towards ensuring quality, affordable healthcare for all Marylanders. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no other oral testimony, so everybody check your written testimony. Thanks so much. That's the end of the testimony on Senate Bill 12.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right, we're going next to Senator Bailey, Senate Bill 165, and you're up now, Senator.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And good afternoon to Chair Kelly and members of the committee. Today, we're going to talk about Senate Bill 165, Maryland Healthy Working Families Act.
All right, we're going next to Senator Bailey.
For some reason, I'm getting some feedback. Somebody has their YouTube feed. This bill would exempt our local school systems from the requirement to provide sick leave to substitute employees. Senate Bill 165 gives 3 specific conditions for this exemption. The employee must be called to work by a county board of education on an as-needed basis, must be able to reject or accept the shift offered by the county board of election, and must not be guaranteed to be called onto work by the county board of education. When the General Assembly originally passed this law, it included an exemption for employees who work on an as-needed basis in the health and human service industry. This bill corrects that oversight or unintended consequence in the paid sick leave law by enacting a similar exemption for substitute employees of local school systems. I've had great discussions with Senator Middleton about this, and he said when they did this, he said this was clearly an oversight. The current requirement to provide paid sick leave is an unfunded mandate on our local school systems, and the requirement has generated a significant cost as our schools are effectively being required to hire substitutes for substitutes. That's what we're doing. We're hiring substitutes for substitutes that aren't going to work. For some school systems, the savings could be substantial. As stated in the fiscal note for this bill when I introduced it last year, Montgomery County and Baltimore County both estimate a savings of at least $1.1 million per year. And that's when we're talking about when we need to be focused on the amount of money that each of our local school systems receive. This money would be much better spent in the classroom working for our children and on other educational needs. I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 165, and I want to thank you in advance for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any raised hands. I'm shocked. I had no idea that this was the situation, that we would pay substitutes for substitutes. Okay. Let's go next to John. Oh, no, to,
John Woolman.
yeah, we have, yeah, John Willems from Maryland Association of Boards of Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. John Willems, representing the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, testifying today in strong support for Senate Bill 165. Greatly appreciate Senator Bailey's leadership on this and the lead co-sponsorship of Senator Bidel. I think it demonstrates the reasonableness and bipartisan agreement that this change is needed. Senator Bailey referred to the prior chairs, Senator Mac Middleton's reference to school systems being exempt from the law. That was certainly our understanding at the time. And he actually articulated that view on the floor of the Senate chamber. And yet, I will say that the lawyer in me questioned at the time whether the language secured that amendment, and ultimately it did not, based on the interpretation that public school systems, LEAs, are not within that broad umbrella of the health and human services industries, which is the exemption that all of the daily substitute on-call language in the bill, as originally passed, applies to. And so what we are simply asking for is an amendment to include us in the very large number of employers and employees who are not covered by the Healthy Working Families Act, who are daily on-call employees in either the health and human services industry or the construction industry when covered by a collective bargaining agreement. And there are some other categories in the bill. This is a very important fiscal, human resources, process management issue for local school systems. It essentially has us managing all of the monitoring, logging, and ultimately compensating through earned sick leave our daily on-call employees in a manner that no one else is required to. And it's an awful lot of work for folks who have an awful lot of freedom and flexibility. And that's really what I want to emphasize. We value our long-term subs, our permanent subs, and our daily subs. These are vitally important people. We cannot, as virtually every other sector of employment, leave a position vacant for a day or a week and have work pile up in the inbox until the permanent employee or a substitute can sit at that desk and start doing that work. So what we have is a situation where we have to put an adult in that classroom on that day. And this bill makes that unreasonably more complicated if we call our trusted daily on-call substitute teacher and he or she says, "I'm sorry, I'm taking a sick day." We then have to proceed to someone else. And I will say that these relationships are rather sophisticated and nuanced. We have daily substitute teachers who are actually willing to work only in specific schools, but sometimes only with specific teachers. And so if that teacher's on-call daily substitute is not available, it really jams us up. And this bill would alleviate our having to essentially compensate our daily subs with earned sick leave, providing that opportunity to take that compensated leave when their options and discretion are amply provided as daily substitutes already. And so we view it as really a technical fix to the legislation that passed a couple of years ago. But as the senator described, it's very meaningful to us in terms of the dollar amount of compensated earned sick leave that is accrued and the burden on human resources staff and administrators to manage a program that virtually no other sector of the economy is required to manage. And for those reasons, we urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 165.
Thank you. Let me ask you one question. Would this bill, or would your support of this bill also apply to persons who are long-term subs? They maybe the regular teacher is out, has had an operation or something, and the substitute that we're talking about is going to do it for maybe the balance of a semester or for several months. Under those circumstances, would the daily substitute title apply to them or not?
Madam Chair, that's an excellent question. And the short answer is no. We really have the categories of long-term substitute teachers. Some systems refer to resident substitute teachers who are actually hired as full-time employees. So there, and that is a transition that actually was accelerated by this legislation. And so that's certainly a burden school systems are willing to take on. If the need is there to hire a full-time employee as a resident sub at a given elementary school or middle school, et cetera, that's fine. But this legislation would not apply to those long-term substitutes or resident substitutes
Okay, that's important. Thank you very much. All right, I don't see any other questions. We have Corey Johnson as our next witness and with an unfavorable. Can you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now, Chairwoman?
Yes, we do hear you now.
Okay, great. My name is Corey Johnson, and I'm attorney and the Senior Policy Research Analyst at the Job Opportunities Task Force. As an organization, we advocate for policies and programs that protect the interests of low-skilled, low-wage workers and job seekers in the state. We oppose Senate Bill 165 as a means of ensuring that hardworking Marylanders can continue to access our current paid sick leave. On February 1st, 2018, over 700,000 Marylanders began to accrue earned sick and safe leave. That was a six-year fight for us here at JOTF. This bill, Senate Bill 165, during the pandemic would leave Maryland workers vulnerable more than ever. Sick leave now is vital. This bill would restrict the rights substitute teachers have earned. Like with earned vacation, if you've earned it, you should be entitled to use it. This bill would stop certain employees from being able to handle their illness. Additionally, this bill would also create a two-tier system of value for educators because of their classification, where we only care about teachers that are sick if they're permanent. Chairwoman Kelly, as you indicated, there are some individuals that have built their entire careers around substitute teaching, and because they are not considered full-time, they are no longer eligible for the protection that was passed in 2018. Finally, I just want to remind everyone, under the Maryland Healthy Working Family Act, currently, you can accrue 1 hour of paid leave for every 30 hours worked. As such, most substitutes haven't even built up enough paid leave, for them to be able to call out that often. So for those reasons I've stated above, we oppose Senate Bill 165.
Not seeing another raised hand at the moment. I do have a question for you, if you don't mind. Did you hear Mr. Williams' explanation to my original question? Does this apply to all substitute teachers? He told us no, only to those that are daily subs, not to those who are long-term or regular subs committing themselves up front to being available for the long haul if the regular teacher is out for a long period of time. So does that difference make a difference to you?
No, ma'am, it does not make a difference. We do believe here at the Job Opportunities Task Force that if you've earned paid leave, that you should be able to use it. Even if one is qualified as a daily, whether it's a daily substitute or a long-term substitute, they should be still entitled to those remedies. It does still create that two-tiered system where we only value educators if they are viewed as the qualification of long-term substitute versus short-term. All of those arbitrary evaluators shouldn't be a locus point for evaluating whether someone should be able to use their paid sick and safe leave.
Let me just ask, would you imagine that there could be circumstances, there's no way of documenting when somebody has asked to be and has been assigned to be, and you're on the roster as a daily substitute teacher, or you are there instead as a long-term sub. So if I sign up to be just available on call whenever there is a vacancy on a short-term basis, why then should scarce funds that we need to educate our students, and there's a lot else the school systems don't have, why should those be used to pay me when what I signed up for was just to fill in if somebody else is out on the short term?
Yes, ma'am, Chairwoman, I understand your point. However, now, especially during the pandemic, the way that individuals, even though we've signed up for temporary, whether it's I should be on call or not, some people aren't exempt from the virus. And so I'm saying that I think now more than ever, we should extend all Marylanders, grace to be sick. As you know, COVID-19, the numbers in Maryland have spiked. And so this is very important. Even if an individual has signed up for being on call or on-call work, that doesn't mean that they then shouldn't be, one, given the opportunity, if they've earned sick leave, to be able to use that sick leave. And they should also be granted grace when having an illness.
Can you think of any other major occupation in which, if you are available as somebody to be called in simply when someone else who is regular can't be there, that you would get sick leave or other benefits that would apply to the typical full-time person?
I'm sorry, Chairwoman, I might not understand the question today.
Well, I was just wondering if you can think of any other occupation in which people who simply fill in when somebody who's regular is out would expect to also have the benefits that the full-time person normally would have, such as being replaced with a substitute and being paid for it.
The only other career that I could possibly think of are people that serve as temps with agencies. And I believe that they accrue sick leave as well, even though they serve as temps.
I see. All right. I see no other hands raised.
Oh, Madam.
Yes. Oh, Senator Hayes.
Sorry about that, Madam Chair. I put it up as you were speaking. Ms. Johnson, I have a unique experience, and actually one of the ways that I got through college was serving as a substitute teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools. And I understand what the sponsor is trying to get at, especially for smaller jurisdictions, but some of the larger jurisdictions where there's frequent absences of teachers, you always get called upon, even if you're just on call. For instance, when I was a student at Frostburg, we would be off out of school for 2 months, and then for spring break, we would get several weeks. But for that entire 2 months, although I wasn't identified as a long-term sub, I was called every day by multiple schools. And so, and the school board kept track of how many times and how many hours you serve. And so if someone is, although they're labeled as being on call, but they're working for periods of 2 months or greater, that would be similar to that of a long-term serve. Is that what you're trying to get at? Meaning, if people are putting in these hours and pretty much serving as a temporary employee, but really filling the capacity of a full employee, they should be compensated for that. Is that what you were trying to get at?
Yes, sir, Senator Hayes. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so very much.
Well, let me just ask you both, under that circumstance, if you really want to have the benefits that the long-term sub would have, why not sign up to be the long-term sub so that the school system could depend upon your being there as needed?
Right. So in most jurisdictions, they give you the option of both. In my case, when I served as a substitute teacher for my 4 years in college, obviously I couldn't commute back and forth to Frostburg. So I would be able to do 2.5 months at a time or whatever. And so it made no, if you sign up to be a long-term sub, you're required to be available for the entire year, because there's some when teachers may be absent from the classroom for an entire year. And so I didn't have that available to me to sign up as a long-term sub because I wasn't available for an entire 12-month calendar year.
Okay, well, we want to be fair to everybody, and we've heard all of the witnesses who signed up orally, but if Mr. Willems has anything to send back in writing before the committee gets around to voting on this bill in order to clarify what the contracts look like that people signed up for, so we understand better the categories, what the pluses and minuses are for the workers and what inconveniences there are for workers. I think that would be helpful. So we'll hold this bill a little while to hear back to see.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Clarity.
Yes, Madam Chair, we will
as
get
to
that.
what the
you.
operational definitions are. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You can call me, I'll call myself.
Madam
Okay,
Chair,
Yes,
I think your bill's up next.
yes, it is.
Okay, we're going to turn to, we've got a few renewable energy bills, starting with Senator Kelly, Senate Bill 65. Madam Chair, whenever you're ready, we've got you up first on Senate Bill 65.
Thank you very much. As we all know, Maryland's renewable portfolio standard is one of the state's primary tools for combating climate change, supporting the development of new, clean, and renewable energy sources. In 2019, this committee passed an ambitious, much expanded RPS bill, increasing the state's commitment to wind, solar, other clean technologies. And I think we all could see what's happening with climate change alone all around us now. And parts of the United States almost perpetually on fire. This is really important. However, there is still work to be done as there are several remaining sources that are not clean. That's in our RPS, what we are paying for as clean energy. Black liquor, a mix of caustic chemicals and wood waste left over from the manufacture of paper, remains in our portfolio and releases carbon dioxide, a major greenhouse gas that harms the climate and human health. While the votes were not there in the 2019 session to remove black liquor from Maryland's RPS because of concerns among a number of our members regarding the impact on jobs at Luke Mill. The mill subsequently closed anyway, and we have no legitimate reason to retain black liquor in our RPS as it no longer meets any of our environmental or economic goals. And the passage of Senate Bill 65 would remove black liquor, therefore, from our RPS. Now, since Luke Mill closed, we had a bill last year. We held off on acting on that bill last year because we were concerned that some of the workers at Luke's Mill who had been impacted might be in temporary straits, economic straits, and we wanted to be sure if they were all taken care of. However, what is happening is that even before the closure of Luke Mill, black liquor was the source of 24% of all Tier 1 RPS RECs, with Luke Mill supplying only 6.6% of those black liquor RECs. In other words, our Maryland ratepayers have been subsidizing black liquor, and that would solely be, not even 6% would come from inside of Maryland, but from people in running these operations in Pennsylvania, Virginia, Ohio, and Tennessee. Without passage of Senate Bill 65, we continue to subsidize pollution being generated in these 4 other states while we're producing nothing of value in Maryland. So we still don't have any jobs. Before we left session last year, I met with people, some out-of-state companies that said they were looking at Luke Mill. None of them has found it something that they're willing to make a commitment to. And so we really are just paying for so-called clean energy RECs that are out of state to people out of state and to companies out of state. We are getting nothing for anybody in Maryland, not economically or environmentally, by continuing to pay these out-of-state companies for the rest. We are currently paying for out-of-state operations that produce no jobs in Maryland while impacting public health generally and the climate by adding harmful pollutants, including nitrogen oxides and sulfur dioxide. Maryland's RPS should support clean energy, preferably with a beneficial impact to Maryland's economy, rather than continuing to grant RECs to out-of-state paper mills. Senate Bill 65 removes black liquor from the RPS and strengthens our state's commitment to truly cleaner renewable energy projects. I therefore ask for your strong support of Senate Bill 65. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to open it up to questions of Chair Kelly, and we're going to start with Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the bill that you put forward. I don't know if you got a chance to look at MEA and Department of Natural Resources combined letter, which was favorable with an amendment. And basically they're saying that the legislation, the way that it's written, appears to be unnecessarily broad, that instead of just eliminating the liquid biomass or black liquor, it also eliminates all of the forest production residues that are used to create energy, most specifically residues that are used for combined heat and power that we're seeing down on the lower Eastern Shore and University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Would you be willing to entertain their amendment that would just be very specific to the testimony you provided and just eliminate black liquor? I think this would be very helpful for doing what you'd like to do and the specifics that you spoke about with Luke Mill, but not necessarily harming some of the smaller manufacturing enterprises that create mill residue or forest production residue that are helping in other areas of our portfolio.
Okay, well, that's an interesting question. Actually, as we had the bill drafted, we thought it applied not to the Eastern Shore, but to Luke Mill. And it's about what we actually literally are now doing by providing subsidies to out-of-state companies in 4 other states. I'm not sure the human health would be helped. And we're in the middle of a health pandemic. I know all the people struggling who have COVID aren't blessed by climatic conditions or any other kind of conditions that this biomass would foster. However, so I'd be willing to study or to have a work group or to talk with somebody to see if we can do something that would not have us in our current situation in which we are getting environmentally harmed, the whole nation is, by what we are paying to out-of-state people for RECs that we are subsidizing. Nobody in Maryland.
Madam Chair, you're preaching to the choir over here. I mean, I've been a long opponent of sending Maryland ratepayer dollars to out-of-state renewable projects. And, you know, I just received one of the reports that I look most forward to reading, and that's the PSC's RPS report, and to see how much of Maryland ratepayer money is actually going to these out-of-state renewable energy facilities, and fully agree that if you ever want to take a look at focusing these resources to in-state, that's what we should do. But I do appreciate your other comment. I think if we, it might not even take a work group, we might even hear some of the comments later today. I think that there's a very simple amendment that would fit what you're trying to do and eliminating black liquor. And again, if black liquor is no longer in Maryland, maybe we can be very specific, just eliminating that, but not necessarily hurting some of these other businesses that are using just a very small amount of this forest production residues in order to create some energy. So I greatly appreciate it.
I might ask our Vice Chair, Senator Feldman, who chairs the subcommittee on utilities and energy.
Yeah, we'll take a look at you know, this issue of whether the bill is maybe a bit, as drafted, a bit broader than needs. Right. So I'll touch base with Senator Hershey, and I think that's a good course forward.
Okay.
Thank you both very much. I appreciate
And
you're in charge.
Yeah, any other? I don't see any other questions for Chair Kelly. Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the panel, and designated as the lead proponent witness is Chris Arkley. I've met Chris. I botched up his name here. Chris, how do you pronounce your last name? So I don't botch it up again.
Erkely.
I'm sorry, Chris Erkely.
No
Chris, you have got 5 minutes because you're the designated #1 witness designated by the sponsor. So you've got 5 minutes.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't know if I'll be using the full 5 minutes, but I'll try and keep my comments brief. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Chris Erkely, I'm the Director of Policy for Brookfield Renewable. And we are here to provide support for Senate Bill 65. Just to give you a background on Brookfield Renewable, we have a substantial presence in the region. So we have about 1,300 megawatts of renewable hydroelectric resources. We
Might need to project a little more.
Yeah.
Your voice is getting lost.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, so maybe talk, again, you're a little faint, so just talk loud. We'll be good.
Okay. We have about 1,300 megawatts of hydro resources in the region. We have 400 megawatts of wind resources and an additional 130 megawatts of distributed solar throughout the Mid-Atlantic region. In Maryland, Brookfield has about 40 megawatts of renewable resources, equally split amongst our 20 megawatt Deep Creek hydro facility and about 15 megawatts of distributed solar throughout the state. To give you an idea of that footprint, we power about 60,000 Maryland homes. In addition, we have about 60 recreational areas for families to enjoy, and we create we create direct jobs and partner with over 70 vendors throughout the state. So just I think that the chair hit on what was the most important part about why this bill is being introduced, and it's that black liquor is a waste product that when burned, the energy emits large amounts of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxides, all of which are potent greenhouse gases. And in fact, across PJM, it's highly unusual for black liquor to participate in the state's RPS programs. As we know in past years, we've chosen to keep black liquor included because of the the footprint of Luke Paper Mill within the state. And we know that with the paper mill's closure, the only facilities, as the chair has identified, that are benefiting from the RPS are located outside of the state. And so to Senator Hershey's point, most of the ratepayer funds to the facilities are actually flowing outside of the state's borders. And to give you an idea of that number, there were 2.2 million renewable energy credits in reporting year 2019 that went to out-of-state black liquor facilities, and that's over 20% of the Tier 1 obligation. So that means, if a Tier 1 renewable energy credit is somewhere between $8 and $10, we're looking at $15 to $20 million of ratepayer funds going out of the state. So one of the things that, I think Senator Hershey brought up and I think is really important is that if we are looking to, if Luke Mill is still potentially up for sale and the change to this RPS might materially hurt the potential for that facility to reopen, one of the things that we might be able to do is to ring fence eligibility to in-state only black liquor facilities. A really good comparison to this is the state of Pennsylvania does that exact same thing. What they do is they permit in-state black liquor facilities from participating in the state's AEPS program, and no other out-of-state facilities are actually able to participate. Maryland could equally adopt this small change in the event that we wanted to preserve that value for in-state facilities. Those are my comments. I appreciate your time and happy to take any questions that you have. And thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Erkely.
You got it.
Any questions for the witness? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we're going to go to the next witness, David Murray. And David, you're going to get 2.5 minutes. The remaining witnesses are allocated 2.5 minutes. So David, you're up next.
Thank you, Vice Chair Feldman and Madam Chairwoman for your leadership on this issue. David Murray here with the Chesapeake Solar and Storage Association, formerly known as MDVCA. We represent the solar industry, not only here in Maryland, but also in Virginia and the District of Columbia. I don't want to reiterate too much on what Chairwoman Kelly and Mr. Ercole said about the environmental issues surrounding black liquor. I think it's important that we consider that as the RPS was originally designed to account for the less CO2 emitted by black liquor compared to, say, coal and natural gas, as we've progressed as a renewable energy industry, we've been able to grow our solar and wind resources in the broader PJM region. Therefore, we have the flexibility and the opportunity to not include resources like black liquor, which has significant environmental implications, specifically to our air and water. I want folks to think about Maryland as part of a broader electricity grid. We share our energy grid with 12 other states in the District of Columbia. And so as we import about 40% of our electricity, the state has the opportunity to determine where that comes from. And what this bill will do is ensure that a greater percentage of that electricity derives from cleaner resources like wind, like solar, from the PJM grid, and not from facilities that are producing harmful emissions, like the chairwoman recognized. And so we stand in support of this bill. We think that it'll help move us to a much cleaner electricity grid moving forward. And again, we thank Madam Chairwoman for your leadership. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Murray. Any questions for the witness? Okay, I see no hands. Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick one based on what David just mentioned. You mentioned we import 40% of our electricity. Is that in its entirety for the entire load of the state of Maryland?
That's correct, yes.
Do you know what percentage, going back to some of the comments that the chair made on the RPS having to go out of state, do you know what percentage of the RECs retired to meet our RPS goals come from out of state?
I would have to reference the latest Public Service Commission report. Chris, I'm not sure if you have those numbers handy.
Yeah, so I think I can answer this. I was actually on PJM GATS last night. The 2019 reporting year, and I think I know where you're going with this, Senator Hershey, there's about over 10 million RECs were retired in the tier 1 category. There's about 1.5 million RECs retired for the solar carve-out, which are all in state. Of the out-of-state contribution, there was about 9.5 million RECs that came from out of state, if that's helpful.
9.5 million out of the 10 million RECs?
Yeah, 10 plus 1.5,
Tier
so
one
we're talking about 11.5 million RECs.
Right. 9 and the 1.5 million SRECs must come from Maryland.
Correct.
But of the other 10 million RECs, 9.5 or close to that number coming from out of state.
You got it.
That's an awful lot. Okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
Any additional questions for Mr. Murray? Okay, seeing none, thank you. We're going to go to Brett Leininger, who's the next witness, who's got 2.5 minutes. And I see Senator Reedy, this is your first time with renewable energy stuff. You're probably Googling what a REC is. I can tell that you're a little bit perplexed.
Actually, I've been studying up on these issues a little bit, and I'm glad Senator Hershey asked the question, because it sounds like there's a lot of out-of-state procuring going on.
Okay. Well, we're not going to get into that now. I just wanted to clue you in here. Okay.
Yeah, we can get into that. Okay.
Yeah, before we get into all that. Okay, Mr. Leininger, you're up next. You've got 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Madam Chair, members of the committee, Brett Leininger, also testifying on behalf of Brookfield Renewable, really echoing the sentiments expressed by Mr. Ercole. Also, just this is a step closer to transforming the renewable portfolio standard to a clean energy standard. But I really have nothing else to add and happy to avail myself to any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Brett? Okay, seeing, we're going to go to our witness in opposition and testifying unfavorable. We've got Jerry Schwartz from the American Forest and Paper Association. Mr. Schwartz, I see you there.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, Madam Chair, and the members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to testify today. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. So I'm Jerry Schwartz. I'm the Senior Director of the American Forest and Paper Association. We're the National Association of the Pulp, Paper, Packaging, Tissue, and Wood Products Manufacturers. Our members are designated as essential and critical infrastructure under both Maryland and U.S. guidance. We respectfully ask the committee to give an unfavorable report. As to the question of the presence of the industry within the state, we employ 6,000 people. We pay $1.8 billion in state and local taxes, and we have a payroll of $734 million, producing packaging, sales displays, corrugated boxes, among other things. So we still do have a substantial presence in the state. And those out-of-state facilities that are generating those biomass RECs into Maryland, they're operated by companies that do have hundreds of employees in the state, and they do buy fiber or trees from the Maryland landowners, which enables them to continue to practice sustainable forest management. One of those companies has filed comments in the record. You can get more details on the connection with that company and those facilities in Virginia and the state of Maryland. On average, about 2/3 of our energy demand is met by renewable biomass energy. We've also reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 23% and improved our purchased energy efficiency by 13.3% between 2005 and 2018. As to the question of the carbon neutrality benefits of biomass, the benefits of using renewable biomass energy are huge. They avoid approximately 181 million metric tons of CO2e, which is roughly equivalent to removing 35 million cars off the road. The Obama administration studied this question about the carbon neutrality of biomass and concluded specifically that black liquor is at least carbon neutral and be considered even better than carbon neutral under certain circumstances. And the leading scientist who raised the carbon neutrality question stated, quote, "Black liquor from paper making," unquote, "is an, quote, advisable," unquote, source of biomass energy. So it is a good use of biomass energy that would otherwise go to waste. On the question of in-state RECs, only 18%, according to the table 8 of the report referenced a few minutes ago, only 18% of Tier 1 Maryland RECs were from in-state sources. The largest source are out-of-state wind RECs, mostly from Illinois. Biomass RECs, therefore, are not crowding out wind and other renewable resources. Wind has had, as I said, the largest share of RECs, not only in 2019, but for the last 3 years, and their amount used for compliance, that were retired for compliance, has tripled since 2015. So if the goal is to increase market share for wind and solar, the market is doing that, while AFPA members and renewable biomass energy are also contributing to Maryland's.
Your time is up, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so wrap up, Mr. Schwartz. I should have said at the outset, you only had 2.5 minutes, but why don't you wrap up quickly here?
I've concluded. Thank you for the time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Any questions for Mr. Schwartz? Okay, I don't see anybody. Therefore, that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 65. And we're going to move on to Senate Bill 153. Senator Eckert, I see you there, and you've got as sponsor unlimited time. Again, Senate Bill 153. Members, turn your attention to that file. Go on.
Thank you very much, Chair Kelly and Vice Chair Feldman and members of the Finance Committee. I'm delighted to be here today, Senator Addie Eckert, to present to you Senate Bill 153. And I believe there is a PowerPoint. You know, our good senator from Western Maryland retired and he was famous for PowerPoint. So we want to continue that our rural legislators continue in that tradition. So I want to say thanks to the panel who you will be hearing from after me, and that's the Mayor of Berlin and John Horner from Easton and Brett Leininger to talk about this bill as well. But first of all, just let me say, we've been talking a lot about equity and how we make sure we have a kind of a level playing field. And I think that this bill deals with the disparity that may have been overlooked in past years when there have been changes with regard to our renewable energy portfolio standard impact all the utilities. So next slide, please. Thank you very much. These are the rural areas of Maryland that are impacted. They're called the Maryland Municipal Utilities. And as you can see, we have the seal from Berlin, from Easton, from Hagerstown, from Thurmont, and from Williamsport. These are all very, very small, some of the smallest municipalities in our state. Next slide, please. So the bill's summary is essentially, we filed this last year, it passed the House, but there was no vote in the Senate because of the pandemic and sine die and crossover at the same time. The Maryland Municipal Utilities pay the full RPS requirements. Only 2 other states in our country mandate full RPS for the municipal utilities. So they pay a 45% premium for the RECs in Maryland. You all know about RECs in your committee. And the municipalities have 1% of the size of the investor-owned utilities. So they really have no buying power. This bill would keep the municipalities in the renewable portfolio program with caps. And as you know, they already have a number of caps in place, 20.4% for the total renewables, and then 1.95 for solar. So there's direct savings that will go back to the customers, the ratepayers, and our taxpayers, and there's no revenue benefit for the utility. The municipalities already are under local government oversight, and we just want them to be treated consistently and equally as the treatment has been offered to our Maryland cooperatives. Next slide, please. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So if you look on this chart, this is the average number of customers. So our investor-owned utilities would have about 781,500 customers, and our cooperatives, 110 about 1,000 members, and our municipalities altogether have 7,166. So you can see that's quite a disparity when you put those in alignment. Next slide, please. So looking at the non-solar REC price, look at the disparity here. For our state average, according to the PSC report, it's $7.77. But for our municipalities, those little municipalities, it's 10.99. That's non-solar tier 1. Next slide, please. So if you look at our solar price, look at the difference. The state average is $47.26. But again, for those very small rural municipalities, it's $67.87. Thank you. Next slide, please. So there's a big disparity, 41% for the non-solar and 43% for the solar. The savings associated with this bill would go directly to our customers, to our consumers, and there's absolutely no benefit to utilities or the town. So in summary, I think this bill creates a better, more equality with all of our utilities across the state. And I think it has a real advantage to our customers in those very small municipalities. So I would like to turn that over to if you have any questions, but I really would refer to the experts from these communities to answer those questions. And I urge your favorable consideration and passage of this initiative. Thank you.
Okay, before we go to the panel, any questions for Senator Eckert on Senate Bill 153? Okay, I don't see any. So let's move to Brett Leininger. Brett, you are the designated lead advocate, so you get 5 minutes.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Is it possible to cede that to John Horner? I was unaware of the kind of the dynamics there.
Okay, we're still trying to work through the kinks. So if John is your designated,
me too.
May I do a quick introduction with just some brief remarks, and that's all the time I would need, and then I could switch it to Mr. Horner.
Okay, very briefly, give an intro to Mr. Horner, and that'll work.
Sure thing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Brett Leininger, here today on behalf of the 5 municipal electric utilities. Thank you to Senator Eckert for the great presentation. Really spells out very clearly what's we're trying to accomplish. With me today is John Horner, who is Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Easton Utility Commission, as well as Mayor Zach Tyndall from the town of Berlin. John will get into some more detail, but suffice it to say, this is looking for some relief here, and really it's based on an issue of buying power, as was demonstrated in Senator Eckert's presentation. I thank you and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Brett. And Mr. Horner, welcome to the committee. You are the designated 5-minute guy, so why don't you proceed with your 5 minutes?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I think I'll be good with just the 2.5 minutes. My name is John Horner. I am the Chief Operations Officer for Easton Utilities. And on behalf of the town of Easton and Easton Utilities, we want to offer our support for a favorable outcome regarding Senate Bill 153. Written testimony has been provided from both the Mayor of Easton and Easton Utilities for your review. All 5 municipal electric utilities in Maryland have tirelessly worked together for about 2 years now to move this bill forward. And Senator Eckert provided a wonderful review of the issues facing the municipal electric utilities. I would ask you to please consider 2 additional data points. First, the average prices provided in the 2019 PSC report in the deck include the higher prices paid by the municipal utilities. So the larger investor-owned utilities are actually, if you do the math, paying less than the average price that the state PSC report shows. As a second point, Easton works very hard to seek competitive pricing in the renewable energy credit marketplace. Slide 13 in the appendix of that slide deck demonstrates this point by showing Easton had the lowest REC prices among the 5 munis. However, these prices were still well above the average prices paid in the state. As further support for this point, the following market prices for RECs were just received this morning by Easton Utilities. For a Tier 1 Maryland non-solar REC, $11.35, which is almost 20% over Easton's 2019 price and 46% above the state average. For a Tier 1 SREC or a solar REC, the price we received today was $82. That's 43% over our price from last year and almost 75% over the state average. These prices are significant increases from just a year ago. So given the 2019 data on slide 13, it is very unlikely the other munis will be able to pay any less than this, and they'll probably pay more, perhaps double for their RECs. This is not a good trend for the munis. And although these market prices will not change due to this bill does put a cap on the munis REC requirements, like many other states have in place, to recognize the economic disadvantage munis have and limit the impact these premium prices have on our customers. We want to thank Senator Eckert for introducing Senate Bill 153 again this year and continuing to fight for the customers of these small utilities and the residents of these municipal communities in Maryland. The town of Easton and Easton Utilities support Senate Bill 153 and request your favorable report on the bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Horner. Any questions for John Horner? Okay, I'm looking. I see none. Thank you, Mr. Horner, for your testimony.
You're welcome.
Now move on to Mayor Zach Tyndall from the town of Berlin. Mayor, welcome to the Senate Finance Committee. And
Thank you.
You got 2.5 minutes, okay?
It should fall well underneath of that. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Zach Tyndall and I'm the mayor of the town of Berlin. I want to thank Senator Eckert for sponsoring the bill and request a favorable report from this committee. The town of Berlin operates a small peak shaving plant that generates power between 6 and 23 times per year. Peak shaving occurs, for those of you that aren't aware, when temperatures are outside cause the cost of purchasing power on the open market to increase. Our community stands for clean energy and a healthy environment, and we support Senate Bill 153 because it'll help fix the inequities that we've discussed here between the small municipal electric utilities and the larger electric providers in the state created under the current RPS legislation. Due to the small generational output of the town of Berlin, our customers pay over 40% more per SREC than some of the larger electric providers in the state. A favorable report of Senate Bill 153 will help create a level playing field between the municipal and other electric providers throughout the state. By the savings generated by adopting Senate Bill 153 will be directly passed along to our customers, the roughly 5,000 people who make up the town of Berlin. In turn, the people of Berlin will have additional discretionary income that they could then direct towards more energy efficient or environmentally friendly upgrades or modifications to their homes. Some examples of these could include some Energy Star appliances, the investment in LED light bulbs, solar panels, all of which could potentially lead their home to be entirely off the grid. Once again, the people of Berlin are environmentally conscious, and we do ask that you support a fair and equitable playing field between the small municipal electric utilities and the larger providers in the state. I'd like to thank each and every one of you and wish you a happy new year and a successful session. And if you have any questions regarding the town of Berlin, I'd be willing to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your testimony. Any questions for Mayor Tyndall? Okay, I don't see any. Seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 153. And we're going to move on to Senator Klausmeier, another renewable energy bill, Senate Bill 316. Senator Klausmeier, you've got the floor and you've got unlimited time to explain the bill. Senate Bill 316.
Okay, Senate Bill 316, Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard Hydroelectric Power. Senate Bill 316 extends Tier 2 in Maryland's Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard indefinitely, which would allow hydroelectric power sources to be included once again as part of Maryland's portfolio. Tier 2 of the RPS expired at the end of 2020, which means that hydroelectric power sources are no longer eligible to apply for renewable energy credits. Reintroducing hydropower to the RPS preserves the participation of low-cost resource, which has an insignificant cost to ratepayers that has been in the portfolio for over 15 years. It should be noted that other states have incorporated Tier 2 into their RPS as a permanent fixture. Maryland has not only solar and wind in the RPS, but has many other sources of energy, including biomass, methane from landfill, and wastewater treatment plants. It should be noted that poultry litter to energy, waste to energy, and refuse-derived fuel. If we are to include such a wide array of sources, at a minimum, energy sources like hydropower should be represented. With me today, I have Chris Ercole and Brett Leininger on behalf of Brookfield Renewable Partners to explain further the benefits of permanently extending Tier 2 in the RPS. And I thank the committee for their consideration of Senate Bill 316, and I ask for a very favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Just real quick before we go to any questions, it appears that with the raise hand function, for whatever reason, with some of you, it's not actually popping up on the screen in front of you, and some it is. So until we work out the kinks, maybe do the raise hand, but also maybe just physically raise your hand so I don't miss anybody going forward. So we'll work out the kinks.
Yes, and I thank the committee for their consideration.
Okay, there's a back loop. So any questions for Senator Klausmeier before we move to the witnesses? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Ercole, Chris, you are back and I got your name right this time. So
bravo.
Designated advocate here, primary, so you get 5 minutes and we'll take it from there. So Chris, why don't you go forward?
Sure, thank you again. So thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Again, my name is Chris Ercole, Director of Policy for Brookfield Renewable. Brookfield, thanks you for the opportunity to provide comments on Senate Bill 316. This is important in supporting the extension of Tier 2. We thank you for your support back in 2019. And so for many of you, this issue should be familiar. So the extension of Tier 2 allows clean, reliable, renewable baseload power resources to continue contributing to Maryland's renewable portfolio standard. Just a quick background, Brookfield has about 2,000 megawatts throughout the PJM interconnection region, and about 1,300 megawatts of that is hydropower. The balance of that comes from wind and distributed solar resources. And as I mentioned before, we have a pretty substantial presence in Maryland.
Remember, he just brought her up.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody mute yourself, and Chris, maybe talk a little louder. I think we had some unmutes and there's some background. Go on.
Okay, apologies. Yeah, I'll try and talk a little louder. So in Maryland, our renewable footprint powers about 60,000 Maryland homes. And again, we have over 60 recreational areas for families to enjoy, and we create direct jobs with over 70 vendors throughout the state. So the extension of Tier 2, there are some points that are really worth highlighting. First of all, hydropower in the state's RPS is the most cost-effective way of meeting Maryland's renewable energy targets. The past 3 compliance years, 2018 through 2020, the Tier 2 obligation represented less than 1% of the total compliance cost. And to further highlight this point, the fiscal note in the bill in Senate Bill 316 affirms that there would be negligible impact on Maryland's ratepayers. And so you might be asking yourself, if there's no subsidy to these resources, then why is this so important? And what it really comes down to is branding. These resources unjustly will lose their ability to sell their electricity and their power as renewable to Maryland customers. And this is vitally important. So without action, a Brookfield resource, for example, would not be able to advertise their resource to Maryland consumers as a renewable resource, and it becomes harder for us to sell that power. In addition to that, those resources would be exporting their environmental attributes to neighboring states. And so, in fact, Maryland would not be able to count them in the future moving forward, which undoubtedly will increase and in fact significantly increase costs to Maryland ratepayers. It's important to recognize, and Senator Klausmeier did mention this, but I will mention it again, all RPS programs in the region include a Tier 2 obligation or a provision for large-scale hydropower to participate in the state's RPS. So not extending tier 2 means Maryland would be one of the only states that wouldn't permit these facilities to participate. Another point that's really important is that as we begin to step up from our 25% RPS to our 50% RPS, and possibly at some point a much larger clean energy standard, hydropower is a baseload renewable resource. It actually assists and provides support for intermittent resources like wind and solar. Put another way, you can't get to 100% renewable power without hydropower. That's vitally important. The last point I'll make is that these hydropower assets, it's not a set it and forget it technology. A lot of opponents of hydropower will say these are legacy resources and they are not new or incremental resources. And our response to that is that these facilities undergo substantial capital expenditure, and they need to be FERC relicensed constantly. And so a typical 5 to 7 year FERC relicensing process means millions in additional capital investment to bring these facilities up to current standards. And so these ongoing reinvestments should be noted in Maryland's renewable portfolio standard, and without acknowledging them means that the baseline for carbon reduction goals is actually backsliding and not moving forward. And so in short, Senate Bill 316 ensures that hydropower continues to be counted and eligible in the state's RPS program. And we thank the committee again for the opportunity to speak on this issue, and happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Any questions for Mr. Ercole? Okay, and again, maybe raise your hand because again, I don't know that the hand raising function's working as it's intended. Okay, well, I don't see any raised hand, virtual or otherwise. So thank you, Mr. Ercole, and we're going to move to Brett Leininger. Brett, you've got 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Brett Leininger here on behalf of Brookfield Renewable Partners. And also thanks to Senator Klossmeyer for sponsoring this bill. This is a very modest ask with a very, very small fiscal imprint. Tier 2, the REC prices, as you can see in Exhibit 1, page 4 of the fiscal note, show the difference in the hydro Tier 2 prices. But it is vital, as Chris said, to enable hydro to be able to get, to enable the state to be able to ultimately get to 100% goal. Cannot be done without hydro. It is renewable, it is clean, and it is very important to companies like Brookfield, who does have the in-state hydro facility out in Deep Creek, to be able to market to the commercial and industrial sector for companies that have 100% goals, regardless of what the state's goals are, for hydro to be put into the RPS so that it can be marketed as such, and that companies can comply with those goals. With that, just a final note that we understand that the Solar Advocates desire to introduce an amendment to address some issues related to solar in the RPS. If it's the committee's will to act favorably on the amendment, I just want to pass along that we consider it a friendly amendment. It's not specific to hydro in our Tier 2 issue, but we have had those conversations. And with that, we urge a favorable report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Brett. Any questions for Mr. Leininger? Okay, seeing none. We're going to go to the next witness, Dennis Kakert from the National Hydropower Association. Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and Madam Chair and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify in support of SB 316. My name is Dennis Sackert, and I am the Senior Manager of State Policy here at the National Hydropower Association. So to address the climate crisis, the hydropower industry has been working diligently with several environmental and conservation organizations and other clean energy technologies for the past few years. So first, in our written comments, we've included a joint statement of collaboration that we recently signed with a broad group of river conservationists and climate-focused NGOs, acknowledging hydropower's important role in our renewable energy future. And secondly, we've also been working closely with other renewables to chart a path forward for how the nation can achieve a carbon-free economy. And so to that end, we strongly support the passage of SB 316, which will help Maryland transition to a clean energy economy by ensuring Maryland ratepayers continue to benefit from carbon-free hydropower. So again, thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee for the opportunity to express our support, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions here for Mr. Kakert? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your testimony. We're going to go to the final witness on this bill, David Murray, at least live witness. There's some extensive written testimony as well, but the final live witness we're going to have today is David Murray. David?
Thank you, Vice Chair Feldman and Senator Klausmeier for introducing this bill. Once again, David Murray here with the Chesapeake Solar and Storage Association. As Mr. Leininger noted, we are introducing an amendment to this bill that also makes a minor adjustment to the existing renewable portfolio program. This amendment will result in ratepayer savings. What it does is slightly decrease the current solar targets in the near term and push those out from 14.5% by 2028 to 2030. So as you all know, as I addressed this committee a couple months ago, the solar industry has been dealing with not only the economic issues related to the global pandemic, but also a number of permitting challenges that have slowed deployment levels. And so our amendment would bring those solar targets down slightly in the near and medium term and slide those back 2 years to 2030 in order to not only reduce ratepayer impact of the solar underbuild, but also ensure that we are more closely matched with the solar bill is more closely matched to our annual target. This also preserves the current alternative compliance levels from 2022 to 2024 in order to spur additional solar deployment in the near term. But as I mentioned, this is a very modest adjustment to the solar carve-out, resulting in ratepayer savings, but it does not take away from our ultimate goal of 14.5% in-state solar generation by 2030. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Murray. And just for the benefit of the committee, the amendment that Mr. Murray's talking about is in the possession of the committee. Actually, it's under my name. So I have an amendment that was drafted up consistent with what Mr. Murray just mentioned. And also, you know, we'll always try to benefit ratepayers. So this is really, I would suspect that Senator Hershey's fully on board with that amendment, but I'll let him speak for himself. Okay, with that, any questions for Mr. Murray? Okay, Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and I do appreciate any efforts to not impact ratepayers as much as the RPS seems to be doing so. But I think it's important to kind of note how we got to the position that Mr. Murray's willing to take in increasing that goal from 2028 to 2030. I mean, this was the year that we made a very substantial in the solar or the SREC requirement, right? We were at or trying to get to 2.5%. And is this the year that we went to 14.5%? Or can you just explain to everybody where we are from what we were before CEJA passed to where we are now?
Sure. The Clean Energy Jobs Act solar deployment numbers were based off of the 2016 build rates of the rooftop solar industry, as well as the utility scale industry's queued projects. And so that was how we got to 14.5% by 2028. Now, obviously in 2019, when the Clean Energy Jobs Act was passed, we did not foresee the global pandemic, as well as the myriad of permitting challenges that different segments of the solar industry have experienced in the meantime. And so what this does is reduce those near-term goals in order to preserve some of those ratepayer impact issues by underbuilding. And so this closely aligns the solar carve-out closer to what the solar industry has been doing in recent years, especially in the last year, 2020, when the pandemic all but chilled commercial and industrial solar deployment.
And the reason on this, I mean, if we do not meet the goals, if suppliers cannot get enough RECs, they are forced to pay the ACP payments, correct?
Yeah, Senator Hershey, and the way the ACP payment works is a negative feedback loop. So the Clean Energy Jobs Act prioritized equity through those alternative compliance payments. And last week there was a few days ago, there was a bill that MEA introduced regarding allocation of those alternative compliance payments. And the Clean Energy Jobs Act ensured that those alternative compliance payments raised from solar underbuild would be directed towards low-income solar projects. So in effect, it's a negative feedback loop, meaning the less solar that we build, the more monies that are directed towards low-income solar projects that can be deployed to help us meet that solar carve-out.
Who pays the ACPs?
That's the rate base.
So they are rate based, and so in a sense, what we're trading off here, if the goal is moved out as you suggest, it is lowering the possibility of having to pay ACP payments because of not meeting the goal. Is that correct?
That's correct. The amendment would reduce the amount of alternative compliance payments that we expect suppliers would ultimately pay in the near and medium terms.
I'm sorry. Okay. In general, it doesn't, I don't have the amendment in front of me, but you're specifically just saying that you want to push out the 14.5% goal, but the amendment doesn't make any changes to the ACP payment structure?
It keeps the ACP levels slightly higher than they otherwise would have. So the way Clean Energy Jobs Act was designed was it set an alternative compliance structure that had a linear decrease. This keeps them at a modest level in the near term and then drops them to what they originally were in 2030, which is $22.50. So this ultimately gets us to the 14.5% goal with a $22.50 ACP payment, but it maintains the ACP level in 2022 through 2025 for a few years and then drops it back down. And again, that's a measure to preserve ratepayer impact.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any additional questions for Mr. Murray? Okay, seeing none, I think that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 316, and we'll move on to another Senator Klausmeier bill, Senate Bill 135. And Senator Hershey, by the way, we have the amendment in the committee, so if you want to check with committee counsel, you can get a look at that. Amendment's been drafted up.
I will. Thank you very much.
Senator Klausmeier, Senate Bill 1.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Chairman, good afternoon, committee. It's great to be here. And first of all, before I get into my regular testimony, I just want to say, when I first got elected years ago, one of my main issues was to get rid of the many, many, many regulations that business has, or people trying to get permits and all that. And I understand some of them are necessary. But this is a typical example of over-regulating this bill. I feel like it is. And so I will continue now. Senate Bill 135 sets a framework for electric security fences to be recognized and permitted, and requires that the installation of these fences be treated to similar work done by other alarm companies. Currently, each county varies when it comes to the permitting process for these fences. Because there is no set standard in law, companies can experience significant delays in obtaining approval to begin installation. Major companies like FedEx and UPS, who use these fences at most of their distribution locations, are exposed to potential theft and vandalism during that waiting period. To eliminate that waiting period, this bill sets a framework for the installation of these fences by allowing construction to begin upon obtaining an alarm permit, and then requiring the installer to file an affidavit with the local jurisdiction stating that all requirements for the fence have been met. If an inspection is held and requirements are not met, the fence installer can be forced to fix the issues or be fined. It's not like they're getting off free or anything else. It's just saving time for businesses. With me today, I have Frank Boston and Cindy Williams on behalf of Amarok, who can further explain the importance of changing the current permitting system. I thank the committee for their consideration of Senate Bill 135, and I ask for a favorable report. So with that, my friends can go ahead and start.
Okay, before we go there, any questions for the sponsor of the bill, Senator Klausmeier?
It just makes common sense.
Okay, that's going to go to Frank Boston. Frank, you are the designated primary advocate witness, and so you get 5 minutes as your timeline. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I won't need that long. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Frank Boston III. I am a legislative attorney here representing Amarok, which is also known as Electric Guard Dog. You may see a young man in the back. That's my intern, Kyle Tilden. You may recognize him. He's the son of Maria and Chuck Tilden, nephew of Lisa Harris Jones, working with me this session. So we put this bill in last year, and we ran out of time. At the Chairwoman Kelly's suggestion, told us to. She said it seemed like it made sense to work it out with MACO and MML. We did. We attempted to. We met with them several times, took their amendments, which you see is an amended bill incorporating some of their suggestions. But at the end of the day, they said that they just did not like the preemptive part of the bill, and so we agreed to disagree in that regard. This bill codifies a procedure that creates a bright line standard that all counties can use to quicken the approval process. The issue is we go for a permit and the counties and cities just don't know how to treat us. In some cases, it takes anywhere between 6 months to a year for approval. We're not in an invisible fence like for dogs. We're not a cattle or horse fence. We have similar characteristics, but we are an electric fence that is different. By the way, we always get approved like 99% of the time. That's not the issue. It's just that no one knows how to treat us. Again, we're an electric fence that goes behind an already existing permitted fence. And that's key because there's already been a long or short approval process for a regular fence. We can't build or construct until that fence is there already, which has already been approved. We're not on the grid. We don't plug into the electrical system, but we're a 12-volt battery operated system. It's not residential. We only are, and it's highlighted in the bill, it's only for commercial and industrial zones. We don't do residential fencing. The bill basically says that we submit an affidavit to the counties or to the cities that we will construct a fence according to the criteria in the bill. The county inspects, gives us a right to cure any issues, or we can get fined, but if everything is okay, then we get approved. The example I like to use is, it's like if you're building a deck on your house, you go apply for a work permit. You pull the work permit, you build the deck, county comes out and inspects. If things are good, then you get your use and occupancy permit. If things aren't, they tell you X, Y, and Z, and you have to correct it before you get your use and occupancy permit. The same is this, this is exactly what we're doing here, except for we're laying out the bright line criteria in the bill so that the whole entire state can see it and can use it. It is important to note on the whole preemption issue, the county still has final approval of the status before any permit is issued. They can issue and require an alarm permit, alarm registration. They can come out and inspect, and we don't get the final permit until they say so. So all of the final approval still rests with the county. And oh, by the way, they can charge us whatever they want to for the permit. It's more about the time value of money and allowing us to get started based off of the bright line criteria that is set forth in the bill. The goal is to get this fence up as soon as possible to protect property from being stolen or damaged or even trespassing. As Senator Klossmeyer mentioned, typical clients include FedEx, UPS, junkyards. That's how the whole idea of the electric guard dog started. The company used to have real live dogs that would go to junkyards at night or places that needed them. And, you know, they would guard, you know, the old saying, junkyard dog, they would guard the property. But it's taken it to a different level, and now you have the fence. You know, Bright View Landscaping Companies, large outdoor equipment, that's what it's being used. Believe it or not, there's a very large demand in Maryland for this product. You have 9 letters from companies who have experienced issues and who are supportive of this bill, who do business in Maryland. And the letters talk about the delays that they have experienced. Thank you for your consideration of this bill. Thank you, Senator Klossmeyer, for your sponsorship of this bill, and I stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Boston. Any questions for Frank Boston? Okay, I don't see any. We're going to move on to the next witness, Cindy Williams. Cindy, I see you there. Okay, Ms. Williams, you're up. 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee, and I appreciate you letting us bring this important security matter before you. My name is Cindy Williams, and I'm Government Relations Director at Amaroq, which is the industry leading company for this type of perimeter security system. As Frank has mentioned, there are important aspects of this bill is that it provides definition and clarity for the local jurisdictions. It really helps all parties involved. For example, the local jurisdictions. It defines what this system is. It is an alarm system with the characteristics of an alarm system. It's monitored. It has warning signs. You turn it on when you leave, and you turn it off when you come in. It sets off an audible alarm if somebody breaches the perimeter, and it places a phone call to the business if someone breaches the perimeter. Again, this is an industrial and commercial, for an industrial and commercial use. Again, logistics, logistics businesses, trucking, landscapers, large equipment rental companies, metal recyclers, businesses that store their assets outside. So just like an ADT puts an alarm on a building to store your assets, we alarm the perimeter. Typically, when I walk up to a permitting department, I get a blank stare when I say, how can I permit this alarm system that has an electric battery powered, 12-volt battery powered fence? And I get a blank stare. Nobody wants to put their name on the line because they've never heard of it. They don't know what it is. This bill defines what this system is. It's a safe, very safe system. It gives that person at the permitting desk confidence that they can move forward and they have a way they know how to move forward. And it doesn't have to go through every department, which takes weeks and months. It allows the local jurisdiction to follow their already established processes for permitting alarms. They still have the ability to determine how they want to deal with alarm systems like this. It helps the local businesses. It helps them to create a quicker solution for their crime problem, faster protection of their property. When these businesses come to us, they're having a problem. Security is an immediate need. You can't wait 4 to 6 to 12 months to get a solution when you're being robbed or when your business is being broken into on a regular basis. It helps law enforcement. It frees law enforcement up from having to respond to property crimes because it stops the property crime. And if there was a breach in the perimeter, we don't call law enforcement first, we call the business, so it becomes a verified alarm. And it helps the industry. It allows us in the industry to speak confidently that the jurisdiction that they're in.
Time has expired.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Ms. Williams, you okay? You wrapped up?
Can I wrap up with one more sentence, please?
One more sentence.
Okay. We have tried to work with several of your local jurisdictions, and some of them have made a partial improvement by making a code change, but it just has not gone far enough, and it still takes a minimum of a year, sometimes 2 to 3 years to get such a code change. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Question for either Frank or Cindy. There's letters of opposition from, it looks like the city of Baltimore, saying if this legislation passes, it would bar a local government from prohibiting the installation of an electric shock fence abutting a residential property in a Baltimore City row home neighborhood. We were told that this is specific to commercial. Can you address that concern that's out there, please?
Sure. The bill specifically states non-residential property, so it does not apply to residential. This type of application is for commercial and industrial type properties only.
Yeah, and Senator, along those lines, to that question, if there is a property that is abutting a residential neighborhood, and I can imagine in Baltimore City that could be the case, especially with all of the rezoning and this, that, and the other. Well, first of all, it's still not residential. It still has to be commercial and industrial. You know, I imagine if it's something that is abutting a residential neighborhood, I imagine we could entertain some sort of language that would, trigger a different type of review.
One option for abutting is to screen the sides that abut residential. We are protected by a non-electrified fence already, but if you have a concern about that, you can always put mesh or screening against that residential side. But actually what we find is if it keeps the bad guys out of that area, because if they can't get into the property where they can vandalize or steal stuff, then they're not going through somebody's yard to get to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm certainly supportive, but I just want to see if there's a way that you can address the opposition that's out there with that specifically. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, we would look forward to working to address that issue. Keep in mind, there's already an existing permitted fence up first, and we go behind that. But to the extent that—
Frank, real quick, say what you go behind that. You mean you go you go away from the fence into the property, correct?
Exactly.
Correct.
Correct.
So maybe to address that concern that Baltimore City has would be the fence would have to have been approved by the city first. You just want to be able to put this electric fence on your property inside of a fence that's already been permitted.
Right, and the bill already says that.
That is
We go
correct.
behind an already existing permitted fence already.
There you
But, you know, we aren't opposed to further clarification because it is not in our interest to be in the residential area at all. And if for neighborhoods that are, for commercial industrial properties that do abut residential, you know, maybe there could be some sort of clarification or an extra step. But again, keep in mind, we won't build unless that already existing fence, which has already been approved by the local jurisdiction, i.e. Baltimore City in this case, is already there. But
Very
yeah,
good.
we're open to an amendment along those lines.
Thank you very much.
addition-
Thank you,
oh,
Mr. Chair.
Okay, Ms. Williams, did you want to add anything before we move to the, okay, we've got
Just really quickly, I think.
Williams and then Chair Kelly has a question, but Ms. Williams, why don't you just one
Okay.
thought on this and then we'll go to Chair Kelly for her.
Okay. I think it's important to note that, as you said, the perimeter fence is non-electrified, and that's what's on the outside facing the public. The security system with the fence that we're talking about does go inside. So to even come in contact with this electrified battery-powered electric fence, you are trespassing.
Okay, Chair Kelly, you're up next. You got a question?
My question is this: in a case where you're abutting a residential neighborhood and where maybe kids could be in the area, I think you've done a lot about safety, but could there be signage also to forewarn that the internal fence is electrified, do not enter or whatnot?
Yes, Madam Chair. And in fact, on page 2 of the bill, lines 26, it says that we must put that the property is located is marked with warning signs posted conspicuously on the fence at 30-foot intervals that state, quote, warning dash electric fence. Absolutely. You're right on point.
One last thing, since some kids are not, let's say during a pandemic like this, the parents are essential workers. If the kids are out and they aren't paying much attention to the verbal signage,
right?
Is there some kind of like the signs you see on poisonous things that could all be there, so that younger kids who aren't reading what you have know that this is something dangerous?
Yeah, I think we are, and I'll defer to Cindy, but yeah, we would be amenable to, some sort of signage that is more, acceptable to the committee, especially for kids who may not can read. But, they will have to jump over the non-electric fence first to get to the electric fence. And I think that begs the question, the electric fence ain't going to kill you. It just trips and it makes you jump back. I don't know if you ever touched a horse fence or anything like that. It just makes you jump back and it sends a signal to the owner.
And as far as the signs go, that it is, Chairwoman, that is part of the sign, is the international symbol for electricity. That is, it's a hand with the lightning bolt and stuff. That's part of the standard sign.
I don't know if you can see it, but Kyle pulled this up.
Yeah, that's the sign.
It looks like that. It is a symbol.
Yeah.
We'll send it to you.
Yeah, why don't you send that around, Frank, so we can actually get a better look at that. Senator Klobuchar, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, and I think Frank answered it. How much does a 12-volt battery even shock you? It doesn't hurt you. It will not really hurt you. It'll shock you.
I can respond to that.
Okay, Cindy.
I touch this fence about once a quarter every time I'm in the office, just to keep me honest about it. It doesn't feel good, but it doesn't burn. It doesn't leave red marks or black marks or anything. It doesn't latch you on. It's pulsed electricity. It pushes you back. It's very akin to walking over carpet on a cold day and grabbing a door handle, and you get that.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Any additional questions for either Mr. Boston or Ms. Williams?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, if you have a second, we can put the sign up on the screen so you can see it. It shows the hands, and it shows the hands with the electric symbols that emanate from it.
Okay, if we can do it pretty quickly, otherwise maybe just email it around the picture.
Yeah, I think he just did it. Did you do it?
Yeah. 1 second. Oh, could I share my screen? You can't share your screen.
Yeah, you can't share your screen, Frank. Why don't you just shoot that around?
There you go.
Okay.
Can you see that?
Okay, that's pretty good.
That's a
I think
sign. That's one of the signs, and it's in multilingual. It's 2 languages.
Gotcha.
He's
And it
got the
has,
signals.
it has the symbol, Madam Chair, that you were asking about.
Okay. Okay, any final questions for Ms. Williams, Mr. Boston? Seeing none, we do have some opposition testimony from the counties and the locals. We're gonna start with Michael Sanderson from MACO. Mr. Sanderson, it's all you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair, Madam Chair. I'm Michael Sanderson with the Maryland Association of Counties. We've submitted written testimony with some concerns on the bill, and actually the conversation so far, I think, has illustrated why it is this committee does not routinely conduct discussions about how you should construct local permitting laws here in the state legislature. We've already found one twist and turn that, well, maybe in Baltimore City, we need to have things look a little bit differently because the construct of the neighborhood's there. I suspect given more time, you might have, well, I don't know, around Deep Creek Lake, maybe there's something different, or in Ocean Pines, we got to worry about that, or in St. Mary's County, we got to worry about that. There's a reason why laws like these are set at the community level to respond to community concerns. When a bill asks you as state actors to step in and really take over local permitting decisions, and in this case, adopt a standard that's been drafted by the would-be regulated industry, I hope that you will ask these questions. What makes this so important, and what's the bill really say? So please understand that the bill before you tells each city and each county, when it comes time to permit these electric fences, you are to treat them like an alarm system. That's it. It's an alarm system. It rings a bell or it calls the owner, and that's it. You are to ignore the fact that the fence might be higher than what you've been permitting in that area. You are to completely ignore the fact that this might give somebody an electric shot, which maybe it doesn't hurt me and it maybe doesn't hurt you, but someone with a condition or a child or a pet, I don't know, that we have to ignore that and treat this just like it's a phone call generator. I think for the state to step in and say that's the only standard that a local government can use to permit these systems is a pretty big ask. I think what's lying here in the background, if we're concerned about making sure everybody knows what these are and what department they ought to go to in our local governments and in our communities, I think the right path forward has got to be a model ordinance. And maybe we've got something sitting on the shelf that the industry has gotten to work out in Memphis or in Bowie or someplace else, and to get that circulated around, that this seems to work and it has definitions that seem flexible enough and so forth. That may be the best path forward rather than a mandated bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sanderson. Any questions for Mr. Sanderson from MACO? Okay, I don't see any. Next witness, I've got Katie. I don't have a last name. Katie from Baltimore City. Okay, Byrne. Okay.
Byrne. Yep.
Katie Byrne from Baltimore City. In opposition, unfavorable. Ms. Byrne, it's all yours.
Thank you. I just want to add on to the comments that we just heard. And one of the things that I want the committee to understand is this is not just an alarm system, it's a structure and it's a fence. And we actually did make code amendments to our building code in order to accommodate this kind of fence. I'm perfectly sympathetic with property owners and customers who are trying to protect and secure their goods. But we are a built environment and we have a large number of block and lots that are residentially zoned that abut industrial and commercial zones. What we did was amend our building code. Anytime there's a new product, sometimes it takes several years for the codes to catch up. So you have a structure that's a fence, and then you have an electrical charge that's behind it. There are two elements to this security, and anything that is built or intended to be built is considered a structure. You still have to get the permit for the fence, and most of the time, the height of the fence is going to run afoul of the local zoning code. So what we did was we amended our building code to identify what an electric fence is, and we allowed the building official to grant a higher height for that external fence so that the customer doesn't have to go to that extra step of maybe going to seek a variance or to another board in order to get that fence height. So I am sympathetic to the business owners and to this customer, but the decision maker as to whether or not this should be constructed, where it should be constructed, how it should be constructed is best left to the local government.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Byrne. Any questions for Ms. Byrne from Baltimore City? Senator Bidle. Okay, we got to unmute Senator.
Yeah, I'm trying. Thank you. So thank you for your testimony, Ms. Byrne. And it's nice to see you again. She was with Anne Arundel County for a long time. But I'm very confused by the two different comments. Ms. Williams says the fence is already there and all they're trying to permit is the electrical charge on the inside of the fence. You're saying that, sounds to me like you're saying that you need a permit to construct the fence. So
correct. So if you don't have a fence that is the companion fence to the electric fence piece, you still have to apply for a fence permit. You still have to get that external fence before you can install the internal fence. And I think this is probably where some of the customers are running into issues, is the construction of that external fence, just as much as what the heck is an electric fence on the inside.
Mr. Vice Chair, can I ask Ms. Williams a question?
Sure, go on.
So Ms. Williams, are you talking about the permit for just the electrical part of the fence, or are you testifying for the construction of the fence and the electrical fence?
No, we don't install the non-electrified exterior fence. What we're talking about is the fence that's interior to an already permitted, that's already been through planning and zoning. They've already said this is an appropriate place for a fence, and we go behind that. But this is a great example of how the jurisdictions don't understand this system and don't get their codes quite right. Because the Baltimore Code, they did change their code, but it states that the perimeter fence can be taller when it's really not, that's not correct. It's the other fence. And we don't have anything to do with the permitting of the non-electrified perimeter fence. We are only talking about the system that goes interior to that fence. It's on the inside.
We want to stay a little bit in order. So Senator Bidle, is that responsive to your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions for Ms. Byrne before Senator Kelly, Chair Kelly?
Yes. Ms. Byrne, when you talk about this as an issue that we should not get involved in, because you are the locality and you know what you want if you've already permitted the exterior fence, could we do one of two things? Either say if the interior fence won't be any taller than the external fence and has the signage in addition that we talked about, the universal sign of shock or whatnot, or alternatively, if we were to say if the locality or the municipality deals with the permit request within a certain number of months. Let's say we gave you 9 months before a state bill would kick in. Because it does seem that if you've got the external fence, it isn't about aesthetics. If you've got the signage so people understand what is there, and if the amount of shock is something that is not creating a serious health hazard or a lethal dose of anything, that it is just kind of being mean to people for the sake of showing you got power. And you look like a nice person. I don't think you would do that. What about it?
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's difficult because even though Ms. Williams says what we're talking about is just the inside electric piece, for us, you can't have the inside electric piece without the outside fence piece. And when you have a zone, when you have a residential zone that abuts an industrial zone that we have all over Baltimore City, there's a reason why we have the zoning codes, right? And there's a reason why there are fence heights, and these things, two things go together. I don't
If they're
think
only asking where the exterior fence is already there, the non-electrified fence is there, which means you had to have permitted that or it wouldn't be there. And this would be something interior to that. It seems like under that circumstance, it is just showing we've got power. And of course,
right. I guess
but you would want to keep businesses that need security, pay taxes, and they offer some kind of a service. If you're allowing the business to be there, you've already allowed the exterior fence. Couldn't you accept some kind of ability for people to appeal maybe to the state if a locality won't even get around to the issue or make a decision within a certain number of months or some kind of a time set of limitations that would make sense?
Well, I think one of the other issues that I'm concerned about, and I'm going to defer some of these questions, I think, to Mr. Sanderson, because I don't want this just to be about Baltimore City. I wanted to raise Baltimore City concerns, but other jurisdictions have other issues. Is that right now it's only electric guard dog fence. So this is creating a change for a new type of fence. So what's to say if another industry or company comes along and their product says, we're going to put this fence here without the exterior fence, right? So this product, I understand, has the two.
We could pass it, couldn't we, requiring what they have already seen as a necessary exterior fence that they're willing to abide by. They would have to first get permission to put up the exterior fence. They're only saying in the case that that is there and they have the need, then they would want you either to, within a reasonable timeline, consider and respond to the need for the interior fence under the circumstances described in the bill, or let them come to the state so that we wouldn't be involved except if some locality, I'm sure we don't have anything but nice localities in Maryland, but if some were being really unreasonable, the exterior fences there that you permitted, this is interior, and with the appropriate signage, can't there be some kind of relief they could come to the state for? Maybe we don't have to get into it up front. If you would accept a certain amount of time limitation for acting on their request.
For Baltimore City, I think we learned a lot with this process, and we know what we look like. We know what our built environment looks like, and we can process these things, I believe, fairly quickly. But I don't want to speak for any other jurisdiction.
Okay, Madam Chair.
A reasonable time limit that would meet your needs, and we could check with other localities to see if somebody needs a little bit more time.
I actually would defer that, I think, to Mr. Sanderson. I think he would be a better person to answer that, because I feel comfortable about our turnaround time. Now, granted, things have been really wacky this year with COVID and everything going online and things trying to get forward. But since we passed our building code in April of 2020, we haven't had the opportunity to see, with new electric guard dog fences coming in, how quickly we'll be able to get them out. So our amendment, I don't know how much longer or shorter it will take.
Okay, Mr. Sanderson, I want to be careful not to go too far back and forth, but why don't you, if you want to just quickly, maybe just since your name got invoked in Senator Kelly, and then after that, we'll go to Senator Augustine for a question, but why don't you just very briefly try to weigh in, and then, because we still have another witness from MML as well.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and I appreciate the thoughts from Madam Chair in trying to advance something that can work for everybody, and I respect that point of view. But I think where that could head is, if you end up with one state framework, you can end up with, we'll have a half dozen bills next year that'll be, well, in Charles County, we want to make sure that the exterior fence is 100% contiguous, and that's not specifically spelled out in this state bill. So you haven't met our needs. And then somebody else comes in with another local bill. In Baltimore County, we want it to be different, or in City of Annapolis, we want it to be different, and so forth, which is basically the risk of taking a local function and deciding to make it a state function. And that's effectively what the question of this bill is do you need to do that? So we're happy to work with any additional concepts that the committee or the advocates may have here, but I think that's ultimately what our concerns would really be.
Okay, why don't we go to Senator Augustine, who's patiently been waiting with his virtual hand up for a question.
Thank you, Vice Chair Feldman. And I was patiently waiting and patiently listening, but I really did feel compelled to speak after listening to this as someone who represents 8 municipalities who have their own sets of standards that we live by. In fact, across the street from me, my neighbor built a fence, or was trying to build a fence that was too tall. And my town came and my town said, that fence is too tall. You got to take that fence out. You got to make that fence a little bit shorter. Whereas my neighboring municipality has a different set of what they want their community to look like. This is the space for local jurisdiction. When I spoke to folks about this, and we've heard the discussion about it's after an existing fence, that is the case, but this fence can be taller than the existing fence. So now I got to look at this long strand or whatever, and if my community doesn't want to look at that, now I have no say in that. And I think that that's not I don't think that is appropriate. I think that it does make sense for local jurisdictions like the 8 municipalities that I have and that county that I live in deals with what they deal with for local zoning issues, and we deal with state issues. It is too complicated, and we'll be coming in with all those kinds of things. And so I just felt compelled to have to say that. And this is part of what we talked about last year with this and some of the problems with trying to dig into a place that has these multiple jurisdictions as I have and that I represent. Thank you.
Okay. That was more commentary than a question, right, Senator Augustine? Okay. So our final witness from MML, Bill George, will be, again, the final witness signed up unfavorable. And then we'll move to the next bill after that. So Mr. George, you've got 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Senator Feldman, and good afternoon, committee. I don't have a ton more to add beyond what my colleagues, Mr. Sanderson and Ms. Byrne, laid out from the local government perspective. I will just add that requiring simply an alarm permit for this type of structure is likely inadequate in a lot of cases. This morning I took a look at several alarm permits for our municipalities and counties around the state, and they're mostly focused on contact information and any sort of special needs of people at that residence for should an alarm response be needed, right? So if a first responder shows up to this residence or business, should an alarm be tripped, then they know if there's someone with a wheelchair, how many people live at the house, is it a really long driveway, such things that are important to first responders responding to an alarm being tripped. And what we have to keep in mind is that that's what a lot of these alarm permits look like, and it really is kind of an inadequate vehicle for the permitting of this type of structure that is actually a structure that emits a shock. So in addition to what my colleagues had to say, I'd just like to add and ask for an unfavorable report. Thanks.
Okay, any questions for Mr. George from MML? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 135. We're going to make a very brief deviation from the schedule here. Senator Gazzoni, Chair Gazzoni, popping in here. He has a bill and he's the only witness of his own bill. So Senator Kramer, if you can just hold off for the Chair Gazzoni and he's the only witness. So we're going to go to Senate Bill 307. Senator Gazzoni, who I know is there, and tell us what Senate Bill 307 is and does.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm sorry to lose Senator Kramer's vote on that, but I hope you'll still all stick with me. This is the same exact bill that I had last year that the committee and the whole body passed unanimously. This is about direct care workers. This is about the fact that we have a dramatic shortage for those individuals, and we're talking about geriatric support people. We're talking about nursing assistants, all the folks that take care of folks, and will take care of all of us at one point in time. And they're not there. They get paid poorly, so it's very tough to recruit and retain. And this is a simple program that hopefully will encourage folks into the field by helping their employers with a matching grant. The total amount for the whole program is $250,000. It's modest for a year, but it's a mandate for every year. And the idea is that they get this matching grant and they work with the Department of Labor to come up with concepts and ways in which to both recruit and retain these individuals. So I appreciate your support from last year, and I hope you will look favorably this year.
Okay, do we have any questions for Chair Gazzoni? Senator Beidle.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, Pam, you gotta unmute yourself. You're muted. Okay.
I don't know, I hit unmute and it remuted. So thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And Senator Gazzoni, thank you for the bill. So I've been working with the Oversight Committee on Nursing Homes and Assisted Living, and I know how important these direct care folks are, but your bill says the employer can apply. And I'm hearing, like, from my workforce development folks in Anne Arundel County, that they have folks they'd like to help retrain, and they could apply for the funds, whether they go through a community college program or an online program. Is that something that you've looked at, and would it be something you'd consider?
Certainly. Look, we gotta, I think the reason that it is the way it is and the limit that it is because of the nature of where we are financially. I'd like to do a lot more, quite frankly, and allow a lot more entities to engage in this. I don't, I've been trying to hold back. I have to hold back my own committee on spending. So I'm trying to set an example, even though particularly given everything that's happened to us in this last year, these support staff are even more important than ever. So yeah, sure, I'm open to it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Chair Kelly, is that you a question? Your hand, there's a little hand, okay. Any additional questions for Zoni? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 307. And now we turn to Senator Kramer.
Thank you so much.
Senate Bill 103.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee. Ben Kramer to introduce Senate Bill 103. Colleagues, this is a bill we heard last year. We had an energetic and robust hearing on the bill last year. And as a consequence of the discussion the committee had during that hearing, there were a number of changes and modifications made to the bill that ultimately accomplished the goals and the intentions that I had, and also address concerns that committee members had. As a consequence, the bill passed unanimously in committee. It passed unanimously off the Senate floor and made it as far as second reading in the House with 20 minutes left on sine die, and never quite made it across the finish line. So I am reintroducing the bill in the exact form and fashion as it passed out of our committee last year. I am hoping that the committee will see fit to again move the bill because of the merits and the need for doing so. This bill builds on the good work we did a couple of years ago in trying to push back against the puppy mill industry And we decided that we were going to stop the sale of dogs and cats in retail pet stores. And there was a good reason for that. We heard lots of testimony why it was we needed to do that. In fact, Puppy Spot, one of the actors in this field, we actually had their employees, former employees and current employees, who had come in and testified about there being a bad actor. And both the Senate and the House said, we need to stop this. We passed legislation to do so. And that leaves the second prong to our addressing the puppy mill industry. The retail pet stores and the brokers, the USDA Class B brokers, who set up these fantastic websites, and they just contract with puppy mills. And when you click on the button on the website, you're actually buying a puppy somewhere, who knows where, and then it gets boxed up and is shipped to Maryland.
You can use the if you go back to the calendar.
That keeps the puppy mills in business. Now, real fast, I want to read to you, and so that it's not Ben Kramer's words you're going to be hearing. It's a very powerful organization that is focused entirely on the online puppy mill industry, and it's called Stop Online Puppy Mills. And they have lots of information that they put out. But one of the entities that you're going to hear from today, and they came in last year, and I have to say, part of my energy last year was generated by the fact that I knew this company was coming in and misrepresenting themselves to the committee. And that was very frustrating for me. And I want you to hear this organization, because they actually now have addressed this particular entity. They address the whole industry in broader terms, but they actually specify Puppy Spot, who's going to come before us again today and tout how wonderful they are. And I want to read to you so that it's not Ben Kramer's words. Puppy Spot appeals to consumers with a slick and colorful website. To the uneducated consumer, the website might look legitimate. They have personal shoppers called puppy concierges, and I'll come back and we're going to revisit that. Puppy concierges that assist you with the buying process. These salespeople seemed to read from a script. They pressure you into putting down a deposit or buying the puppy. When we asked the salesperson if he made commission from the sale of the dog, he said yes. There you have it. Puppy Spot concierges are nothing more than commission salespeople who most likely have monthly sales quotas to fill. And I'm going to address that with actual employee statements about the quotas. However, the site makes it seem as if you are talking to some sort of puppy specialist. Let's talk about the Puppy Spot No Puppy Mill Promise. We think any breeder that holds a USDA license is a puppy mill. USDA licensed commercial dog breeders are high volume puppy producers, puppy mills. Finally, they go on to say, we feel that the Puppy Spot No Puppy Mill Promise is a flat out false promise. Responsible breeders have nothing to hide. They are proud of the way they breed and raise their puppies. Responsible breeders want to meet the families who will be giving their puppy a new home. The bottom line, buying a puppy online only perpetuates the cruel cycle of puppy mills. It hides the reality and cruelty from buyers, and it paints a false picture of these mass breeders. And I wanted to share that with you because I didn't want to be, this is what Ben Kramer says. It's the reality and it's the facts. So real fast, because I know they'll be up here to tell us how wonderful they are. And I don't want the committee to be confused or misled by this broker, and that's what they are. They are a huge broker who have been quoted in articles of dealing with 3,000 different breeders across the country. And basically what they do is they've got a website, and when you click on it, you can buy a puppy that the picture's been uploaded from the various puppy mills, and the company has nothing to do with what ultimately happens. And I'm going to share with you why. First of all, this issue of concierges, these puppy concierges that you'll see if you go to the website. This is from employee posted comments. If you're a rookie, they start you off with BS leads and expect you to meet their quota. Meet their quota. That's what this is about. Another comment. Poor management ran by greedy, unethical lawyers. High turnovers due to toxic environment, overwhelming workload, sales-driven puppy mill puppies. Finally, from another employee on this issue of quotas, and I want the committee to understand, this isn't a sweet, loving website where they want, the puppies are at their feet and they're getting, little treats and toys. This is a company driven by salespeople that have to meet quotas. The people that were hand selected by upper management allows only them to be the quote unquote top dogs. That keeps them making their crazy amount of money while I'm there struggling just to make my quota and base pay. So feel free when they come up and they're telling you what a wonderful company they are, ask them about these requirements to meet their quotas, because that's what this industry is about. So moving along, on their site, if you look real closely, and it's very hard to find, you can, in very tiny print, find the company's terms and policies and actual warranties, not the big stuff that you see in big printed pretty writing. You have to search to get to the reality. And that's what's always referred to as it's in the fine print. So in the fine print, you're going to have answers to what I'm about to read to you from people who actually have posted outcomes from PuppySpot. I purchased what I was guaranteed to be a teacup Pomeranian. They now state they make no guarantees to the size of the dog. The agent did indeed guarantee this pup would be 5 pounds or under. At the ripe old age of 8 months, this pup is already 12 pounds. And there's tons of that online. People who are not getting what they bought. In fact, entirely different dogs than what they purchased online. So how does that happen? Well, if you get into the fine print on PuppySpot's website, it reads, no warranties. PuppySpot further specifically disclaims any liability related to the appearance, temperament, personality, size, weight, color, compatibility with breed standards, or DNA test results of any puppy. So the bottom line is, what you end up getting may have nothing to do with the breed you ordered, and under their no warranties section, they walk away from it. Too bad. And the internet is filled with people saying, I ordered a French Bulldog, I got a mixed pug. No warranties. What you get is what you're stuck with. That goes on to issues like puppies that were never delivered. And then you go to the fine print and it says, oh, by the way, we're not responsible for getting the dog to you, because if it's delayed, if it's deferred, whatever that may be, that's the puppy mill's fault, not ours. So they have no liability or responsibility for that. Their sick dog guarantee also has nothing to actually enforce it. And in fact, it says that Puppy Spot has the right to have their own personal veterinarians review any claims of a sick puppy or a dead puppy. And lo and behold, what happens? The internet is filled with people who have puppies that got sick, that died, and they got nothing for it. And so I won't belabor the point. Finally, though, under their terms and conditions of sale, here's what they have in the fine print. The puppy is sold as is, other than is expressly set forth herein, and then they've got a health guarantee that then they can get around by having their own vet say, we disagree. And then it goes on to say, Puppy Spot makes no representations, warranties, covenants, agreements, or guarantees, including without limitation, those relating to disposition, conformation, size, weight, color, or markings of the puppy. So I'll stop with that about Puppy Spot, but I want you to understand when they come to the committee shortly that you know the truth about what this organization is. So committee, if we pass this bill, we'll be making a significant step forward in stopping Puppy Spot from taking advantage of Maryland consumers, along with all of the other similar entities that are out there making millions of dollars off the puppy mill industry and taking advantage of Maryland consumers. And that's what this is about. And
thank you, Senator Kramer.
And one more comment, Mr. Chair, just so everyone.
Just one.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. The very local or breeders that are anywhere that do it the right way, whether they're in Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, anywhere, they will be able to keep doing business and will be supporting the small, honest, and appropriate entities that do this. With that, committee, thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions for Senator Kramer? Okay, I don't see any questions for Senator Kramer. So we're going to go to the next witness, Sarah Yassin, who is the designated lead advocate designated by Senator Kramer. So Sarah, I'm trying to find Sarah here on the screen.
I'm there.
Okay, Sarah. Okay, you've got 5 minutes. We don't see you on camera, but you don't have to be on camera if you don't want to. So
okay. There you go.
Okay, you got 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Feldman, members of committee. My name is Sarah Yassin, and I'm the Maryland team leader for Bailing Out Benji. We are a national nonprofit that researches and investigates the commercial breeding industry of companion animals. My colleague and president of Bailing Out Benji will be speaking to you shortly. I'm testifying in support of Senate Bill 103. And I'm just going to come to the aspect of what our Maryland pet stores are doing presently. So the No More Puppy and Kitten Mills Act of 2018 was passed, signed by Governor Hogan, and went into effect on January 1st of 2020. I've been monitoring the Maryland pet stores since that day, and on January 1st of 2020, the pet stores did close down, but only in anticipation of their lawsuit that they, along with a notorious puppy mill broker and a Missouri puppy mill breeder, filed in federal court. They claim the act violated the Commerce Clause of the United States Constitution. I went to Baltimore in February of 2020, and I listened to a 2-day hearing in federal court before Judge Alan Hollander. Judge Hollander rejected their argument and dismissed their lawsuit. She held that the state of Maryland did in fact have a compelling interest to protect consumers and reduce the financial support for mill breeders and to encourage pet adoptions in passing the Act of 2018. After that opinion was given, the pet stores were not complying to our law. Presently, they are open to the public by appointment, and they're still selling puppy mill puppies to consumers in violation of the law. We have filed complaint after complaint. The city of Rockville voided one pet store's license, but when I go onto their website, I can still purchase a mill puppy from them. So I just want to say that courts have spoken, localities have spoken, many animal advocacy groups and citizens have spoken, and the lawmakers of this body have spoken when they passed the law in 2018. And I just think we should just finish this in 2021. I asked for a favorable report of Senate Bill 103, and I thank Senator Kramer for its sponsorship.
Okay, thank you for testimony. Any questions for the witness? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to Lisa Radoff as our next witness. Lisa, you've got 2.5 minutes.
Hello, Chair Kelly, Vice Chair Feldman, members of the Senate Finance Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Lisa Radoff. I'm the President and Chairman of Maryland Votes for Animals here in support of SB 103. I will just make a few points because you've heard very compelling testimony from Senator Kramer and several advocates. I know many of you remember last year's hearing. It was contentious at times, but the result was so favorable that this committee moved the legislation and it went on to pass unanimously in the Senate and then on to the House where it ran out of time. It's important that we close the loopholes in this legislation that was passed in 2018 so that Marylanders are not supporting the puppy mills industry. We do not want to treat dogs and cats like inventory. They are our best friends. We need to continue to make Maryland a state that says no to profit from puppy mills. And with that, I want to thank Senator Kramer for his sponsorship of this bill and urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Radoff? Okay, seeing none. Next witness is Mindy Callison. Mindy?
I'm here. I'm unable to start my video. Oh, here we go.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for your time today. My name is Mindy Callison, and I'm the founder and executive director of Bailing Out Benji. I'm speaking in favor of SB 103. As Sarah mentioned, our nonprofit exists to research and investigate the commercial breeding industry of companion animals and trace those animals as they move across the country from these facilities to pet stores and online customers. To give you an idea of the scope of our work, to date, we've connected over 350 pet stores in 32 states to the thousands of facilities they buy from. All of our research can be independently verified by the Department of Ag. I want to speak about the dog brokering world and the lack of transparency that exists. Our research has connected one Maryland store to a 2-time Horrible 100 puppy mill broker in Ohio. This facility also operates as a sham rescue and nonprofit in order to sell the same commercially bred puppies as rescues in a clear act of consumer fraud. This puppy laundering scheme is a nationwide effort started by dog brokers in order to skirt local and state laws. Both California and Iowa have cracked down on these sham businesses, but it's happening here in Maryland as well. Our research uncovered that the owner of Maryland Puppies Online, located in Bel Air, operate the USDA facility Little Puppies Online out of Ohio, and Dogs to the Rescue, also out of Ohio. Due to their ongoing federal violations, this facility has been named one of the worst puppy mills in the country twice, but that doesn't stop them from operating brokering websites in at least 5 different states, including Maryland. From the business side, stores and brokering websites such as puppyspot.com use online ordering systems through brokers like Pinnacle. Much like Amazon or Walmart, stores or websites add puppies and kittens to their cart and have them shipped to businesses or consumers for resale. These transactions are all done online with little to no verification that the breeding facilities are humane and without violations. Through every step of the puppy ordering, buying, and reselling business, there is a concerning lack of transparency. The consumers buying these puppies have no way of knowing for sure where they were born. In fact, many consumers have emailed us to learn more about the breeders they bought their puppies from websites including puppyspot.com. Because of this, we strongly believe that SB 103 would add much needed consumer protection in the state of Maryland. Thank you so much for your time and your attention today.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Any questions for Ms. Callison? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to the final witness of the proponents. We've got Chloe Waterman on the line. Chloe, you've got 2.5 minutes.
Great, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Chloe Waterman. I'm testifying today as an individual Maryland resident in support of this legislation. I have worked on puppy mill issues in Maryland for many years. The state has set a strong intention to crack down on these unscrupulous facilities. So we have regulated the breeders that are in our state within Maryland to try to prevent puppy mills from operating within our own borders. But Marylanders were still fueling the puppy mill crisis through pet sales. So then we and this committee turned to retail pet stores as one of the prime venues that sell pets to unsuspecting consumers that come ultimately from puppy mills in these horrific conditions that the other witnesses have described. So now what's left, if we look at in the state and we've looked at retail pet stores, it's these online sales and it's these brokers. And Senator Kramer described, and Mindy did as well, the types of entities that these are. There aren't that many brokers that are registered, and we know that all of them are bad actors. And if you have any questions about this, if you want to see for yourself, just look up any one of their names, Google their name and Better Business Bureau, and just look at the litany of complaints under any of them. So for Puppy Spot, you'll hear them speak. Senator Kramer presented already a lot of evidence that they are not a good actor. They are not the type of business that we want to be allowing to sell to Maryland consumers who love their puppies and want a puppy that comes from a responsible operation. Responsible breeders do not sell to these brokers. Responsible breeders sell to consumers face to face. They let them have the opportunity to meet the parents of the puppy and make sure that it's a legitimate and humane operation that aligns with the values that we know that Marylanders have as animal lovers. So with that, I will close early and happy to answer any questions, but thanks so much to Senator Kramer and for this committee for your leadership on this issue this year and before. Maryland is has some of the strongest laws in the country around this, thanks to you all. And really, once we get to internet sales, I think that you guys may get a break from hearing some puppy mill issues for a few years, which I know may be another benefit to the committee. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Any questions for Ms. Waterman? Okay, thank you. So that does it with the favorables. We're now going to turn to, we've got 3 witnesses signed up unfavorable, starting with Josh Kreinberg from Puppy Spot. Mr. Kreinberg, I think you're there. So you're up.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman and Mr. Vice Chairman and members of the committee. So Puppy Spot, we are a USDA licensed and inspected service, helping people, including the people in Maryland, find puppies through our network of screened and vetted responsible breeders. And we can tick through a number of the things we do to make sure we're screening breeders. But first off, I'd just like to make sure everyone knows that that about approximately 500 Maryland residents got their puppies last year through us during a pandemic, and that were delivered to them, including several Make-A-Wish children and their families. So we do provide a crucial function. And as we talked about the last time that we were in front of you, we talked about the efforts that we do put into screening and vetting breeders, including the fact that we have a scientific advisory board. We work with an organization called American Humane. We collaborate with them in order to screen the breeders as well. We are all about transparency. We post all of our reviews on our website of legitimate, vetted approved customers. In fact, folks who have actually had a transaction with us, rather than many other websites where people can just post about it. We have a 4.6 out of 5-star rating there, including over 9,500 5-star ratings out of 12,000 listings as well. So every time when we talk about reading off of internet postings and the like, I would encourage everybody to read all that is out there when you do that, instead of selecting certain excerpts from certain pieces. And as far as this goes is with this legislation, we fully support the cause. It's well-intentioned. We're all about what's best, the best interest of animals and the dogs, and we're all about adhering to high breeding standards. We just think that this needs to be done in a manner that actually focuses on substandard breeders, as opposed to just on breeders having people come to their homes and addressing it in that way. You're removing an opportunity to really up the standards. And a number of these things that were cited, we can go through them point by point, but they're largely untrue. We have people called puppy concierges. No one buys a dog through us without actually going through a screening process themselves. There's no point and click. Commission services on there. Yes, that's how you motivate certain people to get the job done, but they're not credited for commissions on any placements that result in any issues along these lines. So people take the care in making a good fit. And
Time has expired.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kreinberg. Any questions, excuse me, for Mr. Kreinberg? No questions. Okay. Seeing none, we're going to go to the next witness. We've got Mr. Likens from the Joint Advisory Council, Robert Likens. Mr. Likens?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, Madam Chair. I just wanted to speak briefly about more broadly some of the impacts of this legislation as well as the last bill. I'm with the Pet Industry Joint Advisory Council. We're the nation's largest association for the responsible pet trade. The basic challenge with this bill is it's based on the premise that rescues are good and pet stores are bad. And it's a premise that is both simplistic and wrong. You've got a situation where most pet stores are doing the right thing, being responsible, being ethical, just as most rescues are. Unfortunately, when a pet store is acting irresponsible or unethically, it's very easy to detect and very easy to follow through on, whereas if it's a rescue, it can be much harder to trace. You've got issues that don't exist with pet stores, like the fact that hoarders will use the name of being a rescue as a way to hide in plain sight. You also have what we've seen emerging, and that's a model referred to as retail rescue, which are essentially unregistered, unregulated pet stores that operate under the guise of a rescue. We've seen dogs now being illegally imported into the U.S. to satisfy demand. And what this bill and bills like it do is just drive people to unregulated sources. We've also, particularly since the emergence of COVID-19, seen an explosion of scams associated with purchasing a pet. COVID has driven more people to either work from home or be stuck at home. And because of that, we're finding that if you're not going with a large, recognized, vetted business, that when people do these searches online, they're more and more often getting pulled into situations where the dogs may not even actually exist. And these sites have proliferated on social media, on online venues, as well as Craigslist. And we've seen large increases of the number of these scams targeting places that have put bans exactly like this into place. We're also concerned that with COVID, the very guidance of going to a breeder's house or having a breeder have prospective pet owners into their home goes directly in contradiction to current guidance on
Time has expired.
COVID.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We would appreciate an unfavorable report on Senate Bill 103.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Likens. Any questions for Mr. Likens? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to the final witness on this bill, Janaea Thompson. Ms. Thompson, okay, you are the cleanup witness on this bill, so you've got 2.5 minutes.
Hi, thank you. Hello, my name is Janae Thompson. I am a working mother, resident of Baltimore County, co-owner of Just Puppies with 2 brick and mortar stores in both Baltimore and Montgomery County, and the founder of POTA, a Maryland-based volunteer organization that educates consumers on pet laws and animal welfare. POTA, the Pet Ownership Defense Alliance, includes the 4 remaining pet stores where many of your neighbors, friends, and colleagues can find their next furry companion. We pride ourselves in being one of Maryland's most regulated industries. Animal Control and the Attorney General Consumer Protection Division inspect and regulate Just Puppies and other POTA members. We welcome them into our facilities because we want to ensure that our beloved animals receive the best care possible. We welcome scrutiny, but today proponents present distorted facts. Thousands of families who have found their furry companion at a Maryland pet store. But there are only complaints made to the Attorney General that come from those whose goal is to destroy our small business. In 2020, legislators removed important protections for Maryland consumers. However, we continue to honor these consumer protections because we care about where our puppies come from, their health, and the families that we bring joy to. The pandemic has created a loneliness epidemic in our country. According to the Washington Post, more Americans than ever are turned to dogs for comfort. The ASPCA also told the Post that shelters were nearly empty. For years, thousands of families have found their furry companion at a Maryland pet store. We screen everyone that we welcome into our home away from home and operate by appointment only, giving consumers a one-on-one experience. It may be easy for a wealthy Maryland resident to hop on a plane and fly somewhere to go to a breeder's facility. However, most Marylanders cannot afford this expense. It's hard enough to be a working mom when you're expected to manage a household, work 50 hours a week, and monitor your child's online classes. If we don't provide residents with this vital service, consumers will go to unregulated sources like black market Craigslist ads. Today's law will not improve dogs' lives or curb unhealthy Maryland pets. We need a task force to examine these issues before more laws are passed. We welcome regulation. We just need to regulate in a way that leads to what is best for dogs and all Maryland families seeking to acquire the next companion animal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Thompson? Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Ms. Thompson, you indicated to the committee that you're one of the owners of Just Puppies.
That's correct.
It's a retail pet store, correct?
Yep, we have 2 locations, one in Baltimore and one in Montgomery.
Okay. And are you selling dogs to the public? Those stores?
We are not open to the public. We are
I
by
didn't ask
appointment
that
only.
question, ma'am. I asked you, are you selling dogs to the public from those 2 stores? That's a simple yes or no. Either you're selling them or you're not.
Yes, somebody makes an appointment and they're able to come into the store and work with our staff and are able to purchase a puppy from our breeders that we showcase for.
So you are selling dogs at those 2 stores, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay, thank you. Has your license to operate your business in your Rockville store been withdrawn by the city of Rockville?
As far as I'm aware, that's currently under investigation.
Has the license been withdrawn? That's all I'm asking.
No, as far as I know, they're currently investigating that. We're working with the Attorney General to make sure that we are following the law. And right now, we are following the current law based on Hollander's decisions.
Let me ask you this, since you say you are following Maryland law. The Attorney General's office issued a statement specifically in regard to your store and the couple of others that are continuing to operate that says the Maryland statute prohibits pet stores from selling cats and dogs to the public. no matter what method they use. Now, is there anything in that statement that you find confusing?
Well, in the previous
Ms.
bill,
Thompson, please let me
the term
finish.
is that
Thompson.
retail pet store is not open to the public. We are not open to the public.
That's not the language I just read to you from the Attorney General's office, which is stated, and that currently is the law.
But that's what the bill currently is standing, is the term is used open to the public, which you are stripping that in this current amendment.
Okay, thank you very much for your honesty and for sharing with this committee and the Attorney General's office that you are in fact selling dogs to the public in violation of Maryland law. With that,
It's not under violation under the law. If Attorney General is able to come into the store, we do welcome anybody to come into our store. We are actually a facility that's been in Maryland for 20 years, and we hope to provide Maryland residents with healthy, happy puppies that we are getting from our private breeders.
Okay, well, why don't we don't want to get into this late Attorney General's office too much here. That's really, I think, up to the AG. Any, Senator Kramer, anybody, any additional questions for Ms. Thompson?
Yes.
Okay, Senator Hayes. Senator Hayes? You got to unmute Senator Hayes here. Okay. Anybody help me unmute Senator Hayes?
Mm-hmm.
No? Okay, you good? Okay, I'm not sure where Senator Hayes, whether Senator Hayes wants to speak or not here.
Yes.
Senator Hayes, you got the floor.
I'm having a hard time here.
Senator Hayes, do you have a question for the witness?
No, not at all.
Okay, we have miscommunication there.
Yeah, I made a mistake and didn't know how to get off mute, and I hit mute.
Oh, okay, no problem. Okay, seeing no additional questions, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 103. We are going to move to the final bill of the day, Senate Bill 192, and we have Senator West in the House. And so, Senator West, you have unlimited time. You have to take unlimited time to present Senate Bill 192.
And thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair, and the members of the committee. I'm sorry to have, if I delayed you earlier, it was because I was in a different committee presenting a different bill. So in fact, I just skipped listening to the opposition to my bill in order to come join you all here. I really appreciate the opportunity to present Senate Bill 192, which will make an important change to existing law so our regulated cemeteries in Maryland can continue to be properly maintained in the future. Maryland law does not currently regulate cemeteries owned and operated by churches or synagogues or other nonprofit organizations, and this bill does not apply to them. I know that the chair is not here, and I know that's a special interest of hers. I would be happy to work with her over the summer to attend to the serious problem of the older religious cemeteries which are increasingly falling into disuse and lack of maintenance. But this bill doesn't apply to them. This only applies to the 89 cemeteries in Maryland that are operated by cemetery companies and that are subject to state regulation. These regulated companies are each required to deposit 10% of the selling price of each cemetery lot into a perpetual care trust fund. And it is from such trust funds that the money is derived to maintain the cemeteries, both now and presumably indefinitely into the future. It's very important that these funds are sufficient, because if they're not, these cemeteries will lack essential maintenance and fall into disrepair. Currently, Maryland provides that the income, important word, from a perpetual care trust fund shall be used for the perpetual care of the cemetery. For reasons that I will explain, this income standard is old-fashioned and inadequate. The income standard provides that the principal of a trust fund cannot be touched and that the beneficiaries of the trust fund can only withdraw the income of the fund. But the income standard leads to two ways of administering a trust fund that inevitably will seriously impair the long-term viability of the fund. First, in order to maximize income, the trust fund trustee will tend to invest in securities that generate the most income. These securities tend to be fixed income securities, such as bonds, which pay higher income each year than most stocks. But the higher income comes at a price. If you invest $20,000 in a 20-year bond today, at the end of the 20th year, you only receive your $20,000 back. The money hasn't grown. And if you then reinvest the $20,000 in another 20-year bond, at the end of that 20th year, you again only receive your $20,000 back. In a world in which inflation causes the cost of living to rise each year, you can see how a system that induces the trustees of perpetual care trust funds to invest the fund principal in fixed income securities will, over time, strap cemetery owners of the money that they require to properly maintain the cemeteries. And then comes the second problem. As the income produced by a trust fund's investment in fixed income securities becomes inadequate to pay for a cemetery's maintenance, the fund trustee will be tempted to invest in more risky investments with higher payoffs. This policy might work for a time, but more risky investments are by definition more risky. And at some point, it's likely that the principal of the trust fund will be impaired or lost altogether. Recognizing the deficiencies of using the income standard, many years ago, the nation's leading foundations and its university endowments, hospital endowments, and other endowments shifted to a different standard of investing known as the total return standard. The standard's not in the least bit exotic or unusual today. I'm a member of an Episcopal church in downtown Baltimore. Our church endowment is invested pursuant to the total return standard. I'm also on the board of a charitable foundation that annually donates about $700,000 to Baltimore City nonprofits which benefit underprivileged children. Our endowment is invested pursuant to the total return standard. And finally, when my parents both passed away in the first decade of the century and left their money in trust for my brother and me, we used the provisions of existing Maryland estates and trust law to change the investment standard of their family trust and invest it now pursuant to a total return standard. Those kinds of trusts are known as unitrusts. They're in Maryland's estates and trust law. They're available to any family like ours that wants to convert their trust from the income standard to the total return standard. So the total return standard is sanctioned and recognized by Maryland law today. Senate Bill 192 will allow a regulated Maryland cemetery to either select the income or the total return method of distributing money from the cemetery's perpetual care trust fund. If the cemetery were to choose the total return method, the trustee would compute the end of year fair market value of the trust fund principal for each of the past 3 years, take the average, and then distribute to the cemetery up to 4% of that average periodically during the following year to be used for cemetery maintenance. It is critical to note here that Senate Bill 192 explicitly provides that such a distribution may only be used for cemetery maintenance, repair, and administrative purposes. Not a single dime of those distributions will find its way into the pockets of the cemetery owners. The advantage of the total return method is that it will encourage the trust. Excuse me?
Good.
Somebody muted. I'm sorry. Go continue. I think one of our senators was unmuted. Go on.
Okay, I'm sorry. The advantage of the total return method is that it will encourage the fund trustees to invest fund assets in a balanced way in some securities that will pay current income, but also in securities expected to pay very little current income, but rather to appreciate in value over the years. That appreciation in the value of the fund principal that will enable cemeteries over time to be able to cope with inflationary pressures and enough money available to continue to pay for the proper maintenance of the cemetery as the decades pass. Senate Bill 192 further provides that all realized capital gains of a perpetual care trust fund quote, shall be deposited in the Perpetual Care Trust Fund as principal of this Perpetual Care Trust Fund, close quotes. Once again, therefore, Senate Bill 192 makes it clear that the owner of the cemetery will not profit from the investment of some of the fund's assets in growth stocks. Now, I have attached to my testimony several documents, which I hope you can take a look at, which show the dramatic growth of the US stock market over the past 100 years. I've got two of them here, I can show them all to you. But basically what they show is that no matter whether you choose a 30-year time horizon, a 50-year time horizon, a 100-year time horizon, the American stock market has grown as the years have gone on. Yes, there are periods of time when we've had recessions and when the stock market retreats, but it always has found a bottom and then has resumed its growth and made up for lost time. Last year, Mr. Ditzler, who I think is scheduled to testify today, talked with alarm about the fall in the stock market as of last March. I note that by the end of last year, the stock market had found that bottom and started to grow again. And by the end of the year, the stock market was higher than it had been at the beginning of the year. So if you look at these two charts, you will find occasionally times when the stock market goes down for a brief period of time. There was the dot-com recession at the beginning of this century, the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, and then last year's pandemic dip. In all three cases, the stock market found its bottom and then continued up. I think it was Warren Buffett who said, nobody ever went broke betting on the American stock market. So the suggestion that, which I think you may hear from the opponents, that putting any of the money of one of these funds into stocks is risky, it's simply belied by the evidence of the last 100 years. Also, I've attached a very important chart, which you all can find hopefully in your materials, which shows that what would have happened if $500,000 had been invested on the one hand in the income method and on the other hand at the total return method. Take a look at the last 5 years on that chart and you'll see, wow, is there a difference? If you invest the money by the total return method and take 4%, which this bill proposes, the annual money available for maintenance is considerably higher than if you had invested the money in the income method. And that's because you're taking that percentage off of a higher principal balance. Look at the principal balances of the two. For the last year, 2015 on the chart, the principal balance of the total return method would have been $859,000. $500,000 would have grown to $859,000. By the income method, it only would have been $671,000, nearly $200,000 lower. So the total return method, because some of the money is invested in stocks, generates a growing principal as the years go on, whereas the total return method, the principal is largely static. Last point to make, and then I'm going to turn it over to my witnesses. This bill places serious additional restrictions on cemeteries that choose to adopt the total return method. First, in such cases, the fund's trustee must adopt an investment policy that supports the growth of the fund. Second, if the market value of the fund's principal in any year falls to 80% of the 3-year rolling average, the distribution will automatically revert to the income method for that year. Thirdly, the fund has to provide to the Office of Cemetery Oversight financial information for the past 5 to 7 years. And if the directors should conclude that the performance of the fund during that period has not resulted in sufficient protection of the fund's principal, the director of the Office of Cemetery Oversight may limit or prohibit a distribution. In these ways, this bill bends over backwards to protect the principle of the Perpetual Care Trust funds while returning fund trustees in the exercise, permitting fund trustees in the exercise of their fiduciary duties to invest the fund's assets so that they will grow over time. The fundamental premise of this bill is this will allow cemetery assets to grow over time rather than to remain static. Because they grow over time, they can generate more income to pay the maintenance expenses, which inflation is going to increase year after year as the cemetery, life of the cemetery continues. And in short, this bill is going to protect cemetery income over not just the next year or the next decade, but over the next century, so that the income would be sufficient to pay for the maintenance. Lastly, I just want to say what's his name? I'm sorry, Mr. Zinner has suggested that the office of the Emmett Cemetery, that more people will be needed in the Office of Cemetery Oversight in order to administer this bill. I note that in my experience, when that is the case, the fiscal note notes that additional staff will be needed, and there is a budget allocation identified to pay the cost of that staff. In this case, the fiscal note states, since fund trustees are responsible for submitting attestations of perpetual care funds financial health, the Maryland Department of Labor can handle the bill's requirements with existing budgeted resources. So there's no suggestion in the fiscal note that any additional staff is going to be needed as a result of this bill. And with that, I really appreciate your time and turn it over to my three witnesses, Blair Nelson from SCI, Beth Kamik from Clearpoint Federal Bank and Trust, and Camille Fesh, who I know everybody knows.
Okay, before we do that, Senator, we usually ask if there are any questions of the sponsors. So
Oh, that's fine. I'd love to take them.
any questions for Senator West, sponsor of Senate Bill 192, before we move to the witnesses? Okay, seeing none, we will go to Ms. Fesh.
Wait a minute.
You've been designated as the lead advocate on the support panel, so you get a full. Everybody else gets 2.5 minutes. I'm sorry, Senator Kelly. Chair
Kelly wants to ask questions.
Yes, apologize for that.
Yeah. Mr. Sponsor, I know you and I have talked some about your idea with regard to this bill, but what criteria have to be met by the entities that would do the withdrawing? What education do they have to have about the stock market and about the perpetual care needs of the cemeteries?
Yes, I have with me a copy of the section of the code in which this appears. And if I can find it quickly, the trustee makes the investment decisions. And the trustee appointed under the subtitle must be either a national banking association or a bank as defined in the Maryland Uniform Fiduciaries Act, a savings bank insured by the federal government. There are not so many of those left anymore. Or a person who annually provides with the trust report proof of a fidelity bond in an amount equal to the trust fund. So if the trust fund is $20 million, the trustee, an individual trustee, would have to provide a fidelity bond in the amount of $20 million to guarantee the security of the money.
So with these criteria, a very limited number of cemeteries in Maryland would qualify, it sounds like to me. We've got a lot that are already in terrible condition, have been neglected. The graves are sinking, water is everywhere. So talk to me a little bit about the scope of the bill in terms of what kind of cemeteries would qualify for such distributions.
Senator Kelly, I'd be happy to do that. You and I talked offline a little while ago about this. This bill only, you were here at the beginning of the hearing when I really addressed this issue briefly. And I said, this bill only relates to the for-profit cemeteries, the regulated cemeteries that are required under law to create these perpetual care trust funds. The unregulated cemeteries, largely church cemeteries, synagogue cemeteries, and other nonprofit cemeteries, are not regulated by the law, and they've never had a requirement of creating these trust funds. So I agree with you that there's a serious problem with some of, maybe many, of these older cemeteries that are not regulated by the state of Maryland. Some of them are beginning to look like Hollywood horror movies because of the lack of maintenance. And I would be happy to work with you over the summer to come up with another bill which would address their issues that we could discuss next year. But that's not this bill. This bill simply only relates to the regulated
So
cemetery.
do you have an idea how many cemeteries in Maryland would fall under the aegis of the bill?
Yes, 89. There are 89 cemeteries in Maryland which fall under this bill because they're all regulated and they're all well known by the Office of Cemetery Oversight.
And to get the bond coverage that they would need to have in order to do these withdrawals, how much in terms of average money would you say would be required in order to purchase bonds?
The answer is it's whatever the amount of the trust fund is. So if you have a trust fund with $10 million in it, the bond would have to be a $10 million bond. My guess is that there are no individuals who post fidelity bonds in the amount of $10 million. My guess is that the trustee of all 89 of these cemeteries is a bank, is a recognized bank or trust company that we would all recognize, and it itself is regulated to make sure that it qualifies.
Okay, and so would the Office of Financial Regulations for the state of Maryland be the one to determine which banks would qualify? You've got banks that have gone kaput.
Yes, well, it's a national banking association, and national banks are regulated by the controller of the currency over in Washington, or it's a bank as defined in the Maryland Uniform Fiduciaries Act. So those banks are all recognized under Maryland law and regulated by Maryland regulators.
Okay, because one thing that concerns me is that we've got such loose regulation in Maryland of cemeteries altogether, and we don't require very much of the state entity that is there to be sure that cemeteries are properly maintained, and many aren't properly maintained for that reason. So who's going to look at what these banks are doing to determine they meet the criteria if they withdraw the funds and
I
get
can tell
them
you, because I used to, earlier in my legal practice, I did a lot of work for banks. And I can tell you the regulations imposed on the national banks by the controller of the currency over in Washington, D.C. are extensive. And here in Maryland, you know, we got into trouble years ago because the savings banks weren't well regulated. And so all of the banks now have to be insured by the FDIC to begin with.
I'm aware, I sit on a bank board, but I'm just saying.
There we go, okay. So I'm pretty confident that at this stage, the banks that are doing business in Maryland are properly regulated.
And of the 89 banks that have a perpetual trust fund, do you have an idea of the sizes of how they range of these funds?
I don't. That'd be a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but I can contact the Office of Cemetery Oversight and provide you with that information.
Okay, because I find that office not well staffed. We haven't invested a lot in Maryland, and they don't have a lot of expertise. Okay.
Well, let me just say, in terms of the evaluation, all this requires, in order to evaluate it, is what is the value of the principal of the fund at the end of the year. That's a very simple calculation, and it's provided by the trustee to the Office of Cemetery Oversight. So
would you want in your bill, though, to have some minimum size or value before a cemetery could participate in this?
The bill doesn't require that. I would get
perpetual trust fund is pretty puny.
Yeah. Well, there are cemeteries of different sizes. Some that have been in business.
Well, I'm talking about sizes of what they've got in the trust fund.
Well, it all depends on how many cemetery plots have been sold. So, for example, our family is in Druid Ridge Cemetery, which you're probably familiar with because it's right near your district.
I am. My parents are buried there. Yeah.
There we go. So are my parents. So it's a large cemetery. They've been in business for many years. They've sold lots of plots. At 10% of the selling price of each plot has gone into this trust fund. My guess is the trust fund's pretty big. But then you get smaller cemeteries.
I noticed though recently that the fencing on the Reisterstown Road side was really in great disrepair for a long time, and it finally took it down rather than to replace it. So considering how busy it is in that area, that would show to me they aren't rich with money, though they charge a lot.
Well, you're about to talk in a minute or two to Blair Nelson, who's with the company. And if
Okay.
complaints about Druid Ridge Cemetery, he's the guy to talk to.
Okay.
Madam Chair, we good? Okay, Senator Augustine has a question. Senator Augustine. And we do have 3 witnesses also as well, but Senator Augustine for the sponsor?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Senator West, I think that there's been a somewhat bit of a change in this business, in the business of burial. There's been a lot more cremations, which I think has put a lot more pressure on cemeteries. Have there been instances where cemeteries, for-profit cemeteries, have unfortunately sort of dipped into perpetual funds and have suffered, gone bankrupt?
If they did that, it was done illegally, and any trustee who permitted that to happen would have violated his fiduciary duty, and the owners of the cemetery could be indicted, tried, and convicted, and could go to jail. It's against the law. I thought you were going to talk about the cremation.
Well, it's both. I am interested in both, but the second part, I understand that folks will go to jail and stuff like that, and that's important. But I'm just concerned about the families. Even if they go to jail, we still end up in a situation.
Yeah, we all are. But I guess that's the problem we have with almost any that's the problem that exists currently. There are all these trust funds, and they're invested by the trustees. And so if there's fraud going on and money being taken out illegally, it could happen right now. This bill won't change that. The bill will merely enable the cemetery trustees of these trust funds to invest some of their money in stocks, which grow over the years, rather than keep virtually all of it invested in bonds, which show no principal growth at all. That's what this bill is about.
You're saying that they would not be able to use the principal balance?
No, under this bill, it's not permitted. When appreciated securities are sold, that becomes part of the principal, and the principal can't be touched. That's the whole basis of this system. Only the income can be used to maintain the cemetery. The principal cannot, under any circumstances, be touched by the owner of the cemetery.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any additional questions for Senator West before we move to Ms. Fesh? Okay, seeing none. Camille, you've got, as I mentioned earlier, 5 minutes as the designated lead sponsor witness.
Mr. Vice Chairman, Blair Nelson will be the first leadoff witness.
Okay.
And Beth Kamek, our trustee, will be second, and then I will be third.
Okay, so we're going to go to Mr. Nelson then. Mr. Nelson, you have the 5 minutes, and then we'll go in the order Ms. Fesh mentioned, okay?
Thank you, Vice Chairman Feldman, and also thank you, Chairman Kelly, for allowing us to speak today. And I assure you, I'm not going to need 5 minutes because Senator West did such a great job. We obviously have an enthusiastic and knowledgeable sponsor, and for that, we're very grateful. My name is Blair Nelson. I'm the Director of Governmental Affairs for SCI Maryland. We own and operate 13 cemeteries in the state of Maryland, and I'm speaking in support of SB 192. I won't belabor what Senator West has already told you, so I'm able to cut my comments brief. First of all, I do want to say total return it's not a new concept, as Senator West indicated. It's used by cemeteries in a number of states. In fact, it's used by cemeteries in Maryland. There are a number of unregulated religious cemeteries that use this method in the state of Maryland. However, regulated cemeteries are not currently allowed to use it. And I would submit that if it's a safe method for many of these religious cemeteries, then it certainly must be a safe method of investment for those cemeteries that are regulated by the state. In a moment, you'll hear from Beth Kamek of ClearPoint Federal Bank and Trust. Ms. Kamek is an expert in total return and currently the trustee for 5 Maryland religious cemeteries, all of which use total return for their endowment investments. After our testimony, obviously you'll hear from our opponents. I would state that these gentlemen are not investment professionals, and I believe their comments fundamentally reflect a misunderstanding of this bill and what it does. Contrary to what you might hear, this bill does not remove any protection or regulation of cemetery trust funds. In fact, it increases reporting requirements. It mandates the provision of additional information, historical information, to the Office of Cemetery Oversight. And it even allows the director of the OCO to limit distributions if in his or her judgment the trust is not generating adequate returns. As Senator West said, investing for net income is actually riskier than total return. In the interest rate environment of the last 10 years, investment for income has yielded insufficient returns for most cemeteries to adequately fund cemetery upkeep and maintenance. Per the chart that we provided, you'll see how the total return method vastly outperforms investment income and would seek to remedy this situation. It may surprise you that we do agree with our opponents on two very specific instances. The Cemetery Endowment Trust exists for the benefit of consumers. It's for the perpetual upkeep of the cemetery, and this bill very specifically states that the monies may only be used for care and maintenance. They cannot be taken as profit. It also exists for the benefit of the state, because it's the state that would likely be called upon to step in to support these cemeteries if trust funds were to run out of money. So we really look at this as a consumer protection bill. It's one that protects consumers and the state by ensuring cemetery endowment funds are invested in a manner that grows the trust over time while allowing for sufficient annual funds for maintenance and upkeep. Now, in layman's terms, I serve as chairman of the board of the second largest hospital hospitality house in the United States. We provide housing at low or no cost to patients and families of patients who are undergoing long-term medical care at VCU Hospital in Richmond. Our endowment uses the total return method. If we invested using income only, we could not maintain and care for our aging facilities, and we would not be able to provide this vital service to the families who seek our assistance. And cemeteries are now experiencing this same dilemma. Endowments are not providing sufficient funds for care and maintenance. Most cemeteries, including my own company, are supplementing income from these funds with general operating funds. But cemeteries don't have an unlimited supply. At some point, they're going to be full. There will be no more graves to sell. There will be no general operating funds to supplement insufficient trust earnings. So they'll be depending 100% upon the proceeds generated by the trust. If we don't provide for a more rational and a safer method of investing, then these funds will not be available. Total return will provide for the future health of cemetery endowment trusts. I ask that you report SB 192 favorably, and I yield to my colleague, Ms. Kamick.
Before we go to Ms. Kamick, any questions for Mr. Nielsen? Okay, Chair Kelly. Unmute yourself, Madam Chair. Chair.
Could you give us some idea of how many states have already done what you're proposing in this bill?
Yes, ma'am, 15. States such as California, Texas, Virginia. In fact, Iowa mandates that cemeteries use the total return method because they were so concerned with the poor performance of the traditional income method of investment. They were afraid that they were afraid that Iowa, the state of Iowa, would become responsible for many of these cemeteries. So now all cemeteries in Iowa must use this method.
Is there a document that we could look at somewhere from any of these states determining how well it's worked out or what kind of net return they're getting this way?
We don't have that exact information. I mean, we can provide you with the states which actually allow the total return method, but I think, as Senator West pointed out, you would find that historically it's an exponential increase in return using the total return method.
Okay, well, I think it would be helpful if, before we vote on the bill or consider it, if somebody could get us at least a report from a couple of the states that are doing it so we can see how it's working out or what findings they have.
Senator,
Yes, ma'am.
we'll get you that information. That's a very good question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Senator West, yeah, if you can get something along those lines, that'd be helpful. Other questions from Mr. Nielsen? Okay, we're going to go to Ms. Kamick. You'll be next, I believe. Is that how you had it in order? I can't recall. Camille, who was next here? Was it you or Ms. Kamick? I can't.
Yes, Beth Kamick is next.
Okay, Beth Kamick is our next witness, and you've got 2.5 minutes.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair Feldman and Chair Kelly and the members of the Finance Committee for allowing me to speak in support of Senate Bill 192. My name is Elizabeth Kamick. I am the Executive Vice President for ClearPoint Federal Bank and Trust. We are a federally chartered special purpose bank that acts as trustee exclusively for funeral homes and cemeteries in 45 different states. We are regulated by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, as Senator West mentioned earlier. We operate in those 45 different states, and as Mr. Nelson mentioned, 15 of those states do offer total return as an option. And as he also mentioned, with the regulator in Iowa really being a driving force for the change over the last several years in many of these states, as Iowa realized that this option would create a better solution for perpetual care funds after a cemetery has sold all of their spaces. So it's important to keep in mind that total return is useful and beneficial for a perpetual care fund of any size. So if it's a small cemetery starting out, this is just as useful and helpful for them as it is for a cemetery that's in its prime, hasn't sold all of its lots yet, as it is for a cemetery that's sold out all of its spaces. So it's really meant to be something that you can do for at any point in the life cycle of a cemetery trust fund. As Mr. Nelson mentioned, we do work with 5 different cemeteries in Maryland in particular, most of which of those are nonprofit or religiously affiliated who have opted to set up a perpetual care trust fund, even though it's not required. And so because of that, we have counseled and worked with those cemeteries to use the total return method, because as has been learned with endowments and with personal trust funds, total return is actually the best way to manage a fund that's meant to last in perpetuity. As a fiduciary, we have a duty to weigh the current income needs of the cemetery for maintenance against the future needs of the cemetery for maintenance later, especially when it's sold out all of its lots and it can't supplement that income. The broadly accepted way to achieve that balance is by a conversion to a total return unit trust and then investing that accordingly. In order to give cemeteries both the ability to more closely meet their current maintenance needs as well as grow the trust funds for the future, we strongly urge that this bill pass to give cemeteries that option in Maryland, where other states have provided that option. Those were the comments that I have prepared. I did also want to mention some of the questions that came up. One of the questions from Senator Augustine was related to the shift from traditional burial to cremation. What that means is they're still contributing to the perpetual care fund, but it's really a smaller dollar amount that they're contributing. And so a total return, having this on the books now before that shift is really, really strong is going to be key, because they have less money going into the PC fund, so they have to grow it. They have to rely on the growth even more. So it's actually something that we're kind of trying to preempt, creating even more of a problem in the future. And that's all my remarks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Kamick? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to Ms. Fesh, will be the final witness on the favorable panel, and then we'll go to the 2 unfavorable witnesses. Camille, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Camille Fesh from the RWL firm here on behalf of SCI Service Corporation International. We are in favor of the bill and urge a favorable report on SB 192. I won't belabor all the points that have already been gone over, but very quickly, a few points. This bill is about modernization. This is allowing the trust law, the Cemetery Perpetual Care Trust law, to come into the modern world along with the other trusts that are allowed in Maryland. This is to protect the consumers and their families. You know, this is a subject area that's going to touch all of us, and it's very important, I know, to all of us that our family members and ourselves are interred in a location that will be well maintained and well kept in perpetuity. A couple of notes. Last year, this bill passed unanimously out of HGO, and it passed out of the House last year. It was heard in this committee right before the session abruptly ended. So we are bringing the bill back this year. In addition, this legislation does not affect how the money in the trust itself can be invested, but it changes how the trustee can administer the trust. The cemetery owners don't administer the trust, the trustee administers the trust. And by making that change, it allows the trustee to focus on investing the growth and the health of the trust for the long term. As was important to note, this only affects the 89 regulated cemeteries that are regulated by the OCO. This is important because these cemeteries are essential to Maryland and to the families of Maryland. And it is in all of our interests to make sure that the cemeteries in Maryland are well kept and well maintained and well regulated. Finally, we thank you very much for listening to this bill. We appreciate any questions that you have, and all the points that we've needed to mention in this bill have already been touched on. So we appreciate any additional questions, and we thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Fesh? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to the final two witnesses for the day, two unfavorable witnesses on the bill. We're going to start with Brian Ditzler.
Hello. I'm Brian Ditzler. And I'm an unpaid volunteer with the Maryland chapter of the Funeral Consumers Alliance, a national nonprofit consumer protection organization. You have my written testimony, so my comments will be a little different. We consider this bill to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. It would allow cemetery owners to take consumers' money out of the principal and cemetery perpetual care trust funds, which is prohibited by current law. The General Assembly created the current cemetery laws, including the Office of Cemetery Oversight, because of mismanagement, fraud, and theft at cemeteries that needed to be stopped. For example, at Southern Memorial Gardens, the cemetery owner bilked $1 million from more than 550 of its customers. Now SCI wants you to weaken cemetery laws. Last Friday, I received a phone call from a cemetery owner I know in Maryland who told me he has great concerns with the SCI proposal, as do many of his peers. The owner commented that perpetual care funds are irrevocable trusts for a reason. After all, whose money is it, he asked. It's consumers' money that's put into perpetual care trust fund to pay for care and maintenance of the cemetery into perpetuity. It's not the cemetery owner's money. SCI tells us their goal is to increase each cemetery's trust fund income. What SCI doesn't talk about is if this bill is passed, it will also increase the company's profits too. Let me conclude with two comments. The Office of Cemetery Oversight lacks the requisite expertise to make the financial calculations necessary to determine whether it's prudent to limit or prohibit further distributions from the perpetual care trust funds of up to 89 cemeteries. Perhaps most importantly, the last line of the fiscal and policy note this year and last year reads as follows. The bill exposes these businesses to additional risks of depleting the assets in the perpetual care trust funds. That's the fiscal and policy note. We agree with that. And for that reason, we encourage the committee to issue an unfavorable report on this bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Any questions for Mr. Ditzler? Okay, I don't see any. We're going to go to our final witness for the day and on this bill, David Zinner. Mr. Zinner, I do see you. You've got 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Vice Chair Feldman and Chair Kelly. As you know from
the first letter of my last name, I'm used to going last, and so I'll be short. My name is David Zinner. I'm a consumer representative on the Advisory Council on Cemetery Operations. My testimony is not offered in an official capacity or as a representative of the Advisory Council or the Office of Cemetery Oversight. I'm testifying in strong opposition to SB 192. $90 million is a lot of money, and that's how much the Maryland regulated cemeteries are holding. That's a lot of money. And if that money belonged to cemeteries, it would be different. But it belongs to consumers whose loved ones are buried in Maryland cemeteries. Cemeteries are holding that money in trust, and it can only be used to maintain the cemetery both now and out into the future, hundreds of years into the future. This bill is flawed. It assumes that the trustee investment manager knows about cemetery maintenance and future expenses. Really? Do they know how often a road must be repaired? How often the roof of the maintenance building needs to be replaced? How often trees need to be trimmed? I asked the committee, will you see other bills that impact issues that consumers will be facing hundreds of years in the future? Before we allow a cemetery to choose a more aggressive investment approach, we should require that they have an independent analysis by an appropriate expert, an actuary, not a trustee, an actuary who can lay out a roadmap, a plan, taking into account current and future income, as well as current and future expenses to ensure that the consumer's $90 million does grow. This bill can be fixed. I hope the committee will suggest to the bill's authors that they address consumer protection and impartial expert analysis. The citizens of Maryland should expect nothing less. And I'm glad to take questions. Just one other clarification. It was stated before that total return can't be used currently. Of course it can. What's limited is the amount of money that can be taken out of the fund.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zinner. Any questions for Mr. Zinner? Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it's not a question, it's a comment to Senator West. I just wanted to share that, you know, as I've sat and listened to the testimony and read the bill, it seems to be a very well-crafted piece of legislation, prepared very thoughtfully and with all of the proper, I think, guardrails put in place. And I'm very comfortable with the, you know, my hearing the testimony today, the language of the bill, and I look forward to having the opportunity to act on it. So I just wanted to share that, nothing more. Thank you for that.
Okay, any other questions though for Mr. Zinner before we? Okay, I don't see any. That concludes the bill here on Senate Bill 192. And with that, I'll turn it back to Chair.
We have
Chair Kelly, you had a question?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to suggest, colleagues, that we might want a work group on this. I think it's a very important issue. We don't want to do something in ignorance, one way or the other. And if we can get 2 or 3 members, some who are inclined one way and some the other, to agree, maybe a couple of people on each way. But we put together a work group so we can study a little more and know what we're doing and not act in ignorance.
And Senator, I'm going to get the work group that information you asked for.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Madam Chair, I think that concludes Senate Bill 192. So I'll turn it back to you for we're done with bills.
Okay. So if anybody's interested in serving on a work group, let me know. You've done a good job. Anything for the good of the order that you want to suggest or to bring up before we terminate our hearing for today, Mr. Vice Chair?
No, I think you know, we're still working through this world, and I thought today, you know, was you know, we learned a few things about you know, trying to get the machine as well oiled as possible. But
right.
And if anybody has any suggestions on how we could do this, you know, this hearing process a little bit better, I think Madam Chair and myself are all ears as far as, you know, any recommendations. So
you're doing a great job. You're better at it than I am under these virtual circumstances. One other thing that had occurred to me and now I forgot what it was. I knew a minute ago, so I'll leave it until we meet again.
Okay.
If there's nothing else then for the good of the order, let me know if you want to serve on a work group. We'll figure out a time. We don't want to be hasty. We want to be sure that we know what we're doing either way. Okay.
Senator Hershey may want to be on that work group.
All right, I see Vidal, you want to be on the work group?
Yeah, we've got volunteers,
Klausmeyer.
Madam Chair. Vidal and
Okay.
Klausmeyer look like they're jumping on the work group.
Okay, we got anybody else interested? All right, I may try to draft somebody else. We need to know what we're doing. Okay. All right, thank you very much. I guess in that case then, oh, I know what I started to say. I've become aware today that a lot of the bills that are already scheduled for hearing, there are no fiscal notes developed yet by fiscal services. So that's something I'm trying to push them to do because that is a problem. Okay. I hope you don't find that some of yours are in that situation. Okay. Thanks everybody. We'll consider ourselves adjourned.